Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Also, you can request any novel so I can turn into audiobooks. Check out our Patreon for more details.
91. The Essence of Spellcasting. God-tier technique, multiple spellcasting, King of Lumos? Professor Phileas Flitwick nodded, a hint of regret in his voice. I thought the young people nowadays would be a bit more unconventional, perhaps calling themselves the Golden Flash of Hogwarts or something similar. But this will do. I'll fill out the membership application for you, and the badge representing the King of Lumos' identity will be delivered within 2 weeks. Professor Flitwick's conversation with Charles about joining the British Wizarding Duel Club made the eyes of some older students turn green with envy. They were worried about where to find employment, and the British Wizarding Duel Club was an extremely popular but also extremely difficult option to get into. Every wizard who became a member of the Duel Club possessed exceptional skills. Even if these older students only worked as staff after graduation, they would have many channels to access advanced magical knowledge for further study. Or, even if they weren't interested in advanced magical studies, dueling was an ancient tradition with a large following among wizards. This meant that the Duel Club had more sponsors than they could possibly spend. Working there offered generous salaries and excellent benefits, making it an absolutely top-tier place to be. It was a pity that the Duel Club didn't necessarily recruit even one person from Hogwarts each year, as many positions were already filled internally. But now, Charles had actually obtained membership in the Duel Club directly. This was far superior to the club staff positions that countless older Hogwarts students dreamed of. For a moment, the students who understood the weight of this identity looked at Charles with eyes full of envy and jealousy. But thinking about Charles' performance just now, that hint of jealousy in their hearts also vanished like smoke. If the difference between two people wasn't significant, jealousy was easy. But if the difference was as vast as heaven and earth, it became much easier to accept. At this moment, Charles looked at Professor Flitwick, his mind recalling the special shield charm he had just cast. Charles tentatively asked, "Professor, the shield charm you used just now to block my laser spell, I saw you cast 3 of them almost instantly." At the mention of this, a look of "I knew you'd ask" appeared on Professor Flitwick's face. He clasped his hands behind his back, his face full of pride. "Ah, that's my specialty. Whether it's the shield charm, the stunning spell, or most other spells that aren't too taxing, I can cast several of them instantly. Otherwise, how do you think I managed to win several dueling championships in a row and firmly defend my title as the King of Gale? Purely relying on casting speed? Some well-trained wizards might not be slower than me in their casting speed, but as long as I get serious, they won't be able to keep up with the speed at which I cast spells." Charles' expression grew even more astonished. He had thought that the triple shield charm just now was Professor Flitwick's improvement on the shield charm. For a charms professor at Hogwarts, let alone improving a spell, Charles wouldn't find it strange even if they created several unique spells of their own. After all, Snape was able to create the Levi Corpus spell when he was still a student, and together with it, he created Sectum Sempra, his signature spell. If a student could do it, how could Professor Flitwick not? But Charles hadn't expected, judging by Professor Flitwick's words, that this seemed to be applicable not only to the shield charm but also to other spells. Was this a unique technique similar to silent casting or wandless casting? However, compared to the former two, the boost in strength provided by this unique technique could be said to be quite terrifying. No wonder Professor Flitwick could defend so many dueling championships with overwhelming dominance. If he could learn it, some spells that were already incredibly powerful would likely become even more terrifying. After the Deep Blue deduction, it might even be possible to use it in his ancient dragon form. At that time, the power of a triple eternal blazing sun and a triple storm summons would far exceed imagination. Just as Charles was considering how to learn this technique from Professor Flitwick, Professor Flitwick said with a smile, "I call this technique multiple spellcasting. Want to learn it?" Charles nodded frankly, "Yes." The next moment, Professor Flitwick beckoned, signaling Charles to follow him into the charms classroom. "Come in. Since you don't need to attend my large class, I'll give you a private lesson." Charles' eyes showed surprise. He hadn't expected Professor Flitwick to agree so easily. Professor Flitwick said with a proud expression, "I am a professor at Hogwarts. As a professor, I should naturally impart all my knowledge to my students. Besides, Charles, you are the strongest genius I have ever seen. Your future achievements will surely far exceed my imagination. The multiple spellcasting technique, in my hands, has only won a few dueling championships, but with you, it might be improved to a more profound level and accompany you in achieving greater accomplishments. Wouldn't I then also be remembered in history alongside you?" Charles' face showed respect, and he bowed to Professor Flitwick again. The words "impart all my knowledge" were easy to say, but difficult to do. It takes countless hours of effort to develop a technique, and throughout history, many people have been unwilling to pass them on, leading to the disappearance of countless unique spells. If it were Charles, how could he possibly teach others the spells he had deduced using points? Professor Phileas Flitwick's magnanimity is truly beyond compare. At this moment, the other Hogwarts students nearby were also envious. They couldn't learn Charles' talent, but if they could learn Professor Phileas Flitwick's multiple spellcasting technique, wouldn't that be amazing too? Unfortunately, Professor Phileas Flitwick directly closed the door to the charms classroom and warned them, "Do not attempt to eavesdrop. It's not that I'm being unfair by not teaching you, it's that your charms foundation is too weak. Rashly learning overly advanced spellcasting techniques will not only not benefit you, but it will also cause problems even with your basic spellcasting. Before thinking about flying, think about how to walk steadily. Of course, if any of you can create any new spell, I will give them the opportunity to learn multiple spellcasting from me." Immediately, the classroom door closed, and Professor Phileas Flitwick also cast a spell to prevent eavesdropping and peeking, leaving the Hogwarts students watching outside feeling frustrated. Create a new spell? What kind of joke is that? How many students in a generation at Hogwarts can create a new spell? They were well aware of their limitations. Seeing no hope of learning the multiple spellcasting technique, the students gathered here gradually dispersed. Even after leaving the scene, everyone was still enthusiastically discussing what had just happened, as well as Charles' self-created spells and Professor Phileas Flitwick's statement that his talent was greater than Dumbledore's. When they returned to the House Cup area and saw Hufflepuff's total score once again significantly higher, reaching a staggering 400 points, their eyes showed reverence. With a freak like Charles around, this year's House Cup should be locked in by Hufflepuff early. But regarding this matter, it wasn't just the Hufflepuff students who were happy. The Gryffindor and Ravenclaw students also felt quite pleased. After all, Slytherin had won the House Cup for 6 consecutive years before. If Slytherin had won fairly, everyone would have accepted it, at most admitting they weren't as skilled, and wouldn't have any resentment. But the problem was that the biggest reason Slytherin won the House Cup wasn't that they were more outstanding, but that they had a protective and harsh head of house. Every time during potions class, Snape would heavily deduct points from other houses and give points to Slytherin. Also, whenever Snape caught any slight mistake, other professors might just give a warning or lecture, but Snape would immediately deduct points. Other professors simply couldn't be so shameless, and in the end, the House Cup was naturally won by Slytherin House. But this year, with Charles Evans emerging out of nowhere, Hufflepuff was now leading by 400 points. Could Slytherin House still catch up? Not to mention they didn't believe it, even the Slytherin students present felt uncertain. Draco Malfoy's expression was grim as he hurried to Snape's office and reported the situation to Snape. After hearing Malfoy's report, Snape's face also showed surprise. On the night of the welcome feast, he had indeed heard Professor McGonagall mention Charles Evans's talent in transfiguration, and Dumbledore had also nodded in agreement. But at the time, Snape hadn't paid too much attention. He hadn't expected to hear such news today. That little Hufflepuff wizard, his talent in transfiguration was more than just excellent, it was monstrous. And charms, he had just started his first year, hadn't even had a single class yet, and could create 2 new spells. One should know that Charles wasn't from a pureblood noble family but was Muggle-born, so it was impossible for him to have been exposed to magic beforehand. In other words, he truly accomplished this feat during the time between receiving his acceptance letter and the start of school. For such a young wizard, Snape could only describe him as a prodigy. However, after hearing Malfoy express his concern about whether Slytherin could still win the House Cup this year, the shock on Snape's face turned into a look of indifference. He said lightly, "No one can take the House Cup from Slytherin House." Then, under Malfoy's surprised gaze, Snape said faintly, "Draco Malfoy has the collective honor of the house at heart. 10 points to Slytherin." He even glanced at the class schedule, a look of mockery appearing on his face. "Isn't Hufflepuff's potions class coming up soon? Hufflepuff is a bunch of idiots, even stupider than Gryffindor." Just the countless mistakes they make are enough for me to deduct points from Hufflepuff for quite a while. Don't worry, it won't take long for this gap to be closed." Hearing Snape's blatant favoritism, even Malfoy felt a little sorry for Hufflepuff. However, instead of feeling unfair, he felt quite excited. The only thing that still worried him a little was Charles. Charles' previous performance had truly shocked Malfoy. "Godfather, what if that Charles Evans is unhappy about this?" When Snape heard this, he was almost amused by anger, looking at his godson with a look of disappointment and saying, "If you were asking if Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, would be displeased, I'd think you still had a brain. But Malfoy, what on earth are you thinking? Charles Evans displeased? What can he do even if he is? He's a first-year student, and he thinks he can oppose me, a professor and the head of Slytherin House." Snape sneered dismissively. "Even the students who are about to graduate wouldn't dare, let alone a little wizard. If he really dares to raise any objections." Undisguised malice appeared in Snape's eyes. "I don't mind teaching him what it means to respect a professor." Meanwhile, in the charms classroom, Professor Phileas Flitwick was explaining the principle of multiple spellcasting to Charles. "Echo, this unique technique utilizes a phenomenon I call echo. And to understand echo, you must first understand the essence of a wizard's spellcasting. Charles, every wizard or magical creature has magic within them, but in most cases, the magic consumed when we cast spells is negligible. Instead, the main consumption is mental, and even physical exhaustion is greater than the magic consumed. The power of a spell seems related to the amount of magic in our bodies, but in reality, it is determined by the intensity of magic and mental strength. The reason people say that the more magic you have, the more powerful your spells are, is simply because a wizard's magic intensity and total magic amount are generally proportional, creating this illusion. In fact, let alone wizards of Dumbledore's level, even first-year students rarely run out of magic, even after casting many spells repeatedly. Why do you think that is? This question also caused Charles to ponder deeply. He had similar questions when he read the original Harry Potter books in his previous life. The wizard's mana bars in this world were ridiculously long, to the point where it felt like there was no mana bar at all. To become a wizard, one must have magic. But after becoming a wizard, casting spells didn't seem to consume magic, which was quite strange. He didn't expect Professor Phileas Flitwick to mention this phenomenon here, causing Charles to turn and look at Professor Phileas Flitwick. The professor didn't keep him in suspense and continued. "Based on my personal understanding and after reading a large number of books on the principles of charms, I believe that the magic used when a wizard casts a spell does not consume their own magic, or rather, the consumption of their own magic is extremely weak. The source of a spell's magic almost entirely comes from the outside world. This outside world, you can understand it as the world, the ether, the void, in short, it is everywhere. The reason a wizard must possess magic to cast spells is because calling upon external magic requires a certain aptitude, recognition, or identity. Having magic grants you this identity. And the intensity of magic and mental strength determine the level of this identity and how much magic can be called from the outside world. Spells and casting gestures are like commands, commanding the outside world to provide magic for the spell we are about to cast. The higher one's own magic intensity and mental strength, the more magic they can call upon when casting spells, making the same spell more powerful, or casting more powerful spells. Wandless and nonverbal casting weakens the power of spells because it reduces the accuracy of the command to the outside world, lowering the efficiency of the command. As for the slight magic consumption when we cast spells, that's easy to understand. That's the consumption of the action of giving the command itself, so it's naturally very small." Hearing Professor Phileas Flitwick's explanation, a look of shock appeared on Charles' face. His questions about wizards in the Harry Potter world were largely answered by Professor Phileas Flitwick's explanation. Even the dragon language magic of ancient dragons could be explained by this theory. At the same time, the Deep Blue System notifications sounded one after another. "Host has obtained high-grade magic material. The points required for the host to deduce all magic have decreased." This notification caused an uncontrollable surge of ecstasy in Charles' heart. Unlike the names of all the materials he had obtained before, this material was directly called high-grade magic material, and its effect was that it could be effective for all magic. Instantly, the admiration in Charles' eyes as he looked at Professor Phileas Flitwick grew even stronger. He had previously given him so many individual spell materials, and now he had given him such a big surprise. As expected of a charms professor of so many years, his accumulation in this area was truly incredibly profound. However, after hearing this, Charles still had a question. The outside world, or rather, the world, ether, and void you mentioned, why is it filled with omnipresent magic? Where does this magic come from? Professor Phileas Flitwick also shook his head at this, showing a look of longing. This is the ultimate question for charm scholars. Countless charms masters have tirelessly explored this question. Perhaps I won't find the answer to this question in my lifetime, but perhaps Charles, you have that potential. Then, Professor Phileas Flitwick brought the topic back to the multiple spellcasting technique. I mentioned echo to you before, and now I can explain it clearly. When a wizard casts a spell, they use incantations and casting gestures to transmit commands to the outside world. In this process, just like shouting in a valley produces an echo, or dropping a stone into water creates ripples, there will also be similar magic echoes. The magic echoes also contain our command information. Then, through the magic echo, one can naturally command the external world again, forming the same spell once more. Charles' eyes showed a look of understanding. Professor Phileas Flitwick chuckled. That's the principle, it's actually quite simple. However, practicing it is quite difficult. After I came up with this theory, it took me nearly 10 years to successfully use the echo to repeat the first casting. Then it took me almost 20 more years to repeat it again, achieving triple spellcasting. Charles, although your talent is high, I estimate that being able to complete double spellcasting in your 5th year would be quite good. Completing triple spellcasting around the age of 25, and perhaps reaching the unprecedented quadruple or even quintuple spellcasting around 40. As he spoke of this, amidst his excitement, he also cautioned Charles. Remember, just as you need to concentrate more to distinguish information in an echo, using the magic echo will also increase the consumption of mental energy. The more times you repeat it, the greater the consumption. Charles nodded seriously at all of this, indicating that he understood. Professor Phileas Flitwick then waved his hand, allowing Charles to leave, telling him to come find him if he had any questions he didn't understand. Charles bowed respectfully to this universally acknowledged kind professor before leaving the classroom. Charles kept everything Professor Phileas Flitwick had just said firmly in mind. However, regarding the time Professor Phileas Flitwick estimated it would take him to master the multiple spellcasting technique, a smile curved at the corner of Charles' mouth. Perhaps a normal genius is like this, but I'm a cheat. He found an empty classroom, locked the door, then took a deep breath and whispered in his mind. Deep Blue, deduce the multiple spellcasting technique for me. Sorry, I haven't been feeling well after testing positive. After staying up late to update a few chapters before, I really couldn't handle it, so the update was late. My body has recovered almost completely today, so I will continue with the guaranteed 10,000 words and extra updates. Thank you for your support. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 92 Triple Casting. Some words, some things, come at a price. As Charles heard the whispers in his mind, Deep Blue directly deducted 150,000 deduction points and began the initial deduction of Professor Flitwick's multiple casting technique. Charles' heart was filled with shock. Just the initial deduction required 150,000 points, which was among the highest of all the magical knowledge he had acquired. And one had to remember, this was after he had received a detailed explanation from Professor Flitwick and even obtained a reduction in points for magical materials. This showed how high the upper limit of this multiple casting technique was. According to the Deep Blue system's evaluation, its value might be comparable to the ancient dragon's dragon language magic system, but such precious knowledge was taught to him by Professor Flitwick without him having to pay anything. Charles took a deep breath. This favor is truly a huge one. I need to find an opportunity to repay it. Then, waves of knowledge and experience regarding the multiple casting technique began to flow into Charles' mind. The familiar feeling reappeared, as if countless Charles in countless parallel worlds were simultaneously studying the multiple casting technique day and night. All the summarized experience was poured into the instincts of this world Charles. Along with the surge of knowledge and experience, Charles seemed to see the process of Deep Blue deducing the multiple casting technique. According to Professor Flitwick, the first step was to capture the magic spell echo, which was the echo produced after casting a spell. Professor Flitwick said that it took him at least 5 years from developing the theory to capturing the echo, and only then did he summarize a more feasible plan for capturing the echo. This time, in Deep Blue's deduction, Charles started capturing the echo from the Lumos spell, which he was most familiar with. In every second of deduction, the Lumos spell flashed countless times, and countless attempts were made to capture the echo. Professor Flitwick took 5 years to successfully capture the echo, but Charles succeeded in an instant. At this moment, he waved his wand and chanted the spell for Lumos. When the light lit up, Charles also clearly felt a ripple of magic spreading in space, producing magical diffraction, interference, and so on, like water waves. In the initial diffusion, Charles clearly felt the enhanced parts of those magical interferences, which were the spell echoes carrying complete spell information mentioned by Professor Flitwick. The echo capture was complete. However, from capturing the echo to using the echo to cast spells was an even greater hurdle. 15 of the first 20 years of Professor Flitwick's research were spent on tackling this aspect. With his talent, coupled with his goblin bloodline, he would be more sensitive to magic than ordinary wizards. But it still took a full 15 years, which showed how difficult it was. And this only made Charles spend an extra instant. The next moment, Deep Blue's prompt sounded in Charles' mind. Multiple casting technique initial deduction completed. Host has gained a special casting technique, spell echo. Capturing the echo and using it to cast spells again has become the host's instinct. The host can capture the echo and use it to cast spells at the fastest speed, and the power of the spell after the echo has almost no attenuation. This prompt made Charles' eyes light up. According to Professor Flitwick, there was a decay in spell power when using the echo to cast spells. After all, although the echo theoretically also contained the information needed to form a spell, it was difficult to interpret it so clearly in that fleeting instant. Then it would be like a silent spell, resulting in vague commands, causing the spell to be cast correctly but with reduced power compared to a normal cast, only the reduction in multiple casting was not so exaggerated. And theoretically, the more proficient this technique was, the lower the power decay would be. Charles had already had a psychological expectation for this. Even if it was reduced to 70% of the original spell power, he felt that casting multiple spells instantly was a huge improvement. But Charles did not expect that through Deep Blue's deduction, this technique would be directly accumulated into his instinct, making the power decay almost negligible. Then this was truly an epic improvement. Charles took a deep breath, waved his wand again, and cast the Lumos spell. Lumos spell echo. Immediately after, 2 Lumos spells bloomed from Charles' wand at the same time. This could not be called Lumos, but rather a bright, high-power light bulb. Feeling the magic of the spell echo, Charles took a deep breath. This was a huge improvement in strength. Moreover, with this technique, a spell that might not have been able to overcome the enemy's magical defense the previous moment might burst out with enough power to pierce it the next moment. How could the enemy have thought that the same spell could instantly transform and double its power? So Charles, in the next moment, without any hesitation, said to Deep Blue again, "Deep Blue, continue the deduction." Instantly, 1.5 million points were deducted, and Deep Blue deduced towards triple casting. Meanwhile, in the gloomy potions classroom, an atmosphere that could only be described as terrifying enveloped the young Hufflepuffs who had come for class. Snape, clad in black robes, wore his usual expression of harshness and arrogance, a habitual sneer playing on his lips. Just his appearance seemed to lower the temperature in the classroom by several degrees. The little badgers and the little eagles who had come for class with them shivered, sitting down one after another. When the class bell rang, this icy atmosphere not only didn't diminish in the slightest but instantly intensified several times over. Snape looked at an empty seat among the Hufflepuffs, like a venomous snake spotting its prey. The young wizards in the classroom had the illusion that they could hear the snake hissing and flicking its tongue, revealing a sinister grin as if ready to devour someone. A Hufflepuff didn't show up. Snape's tone gradually rose. Let me guess, it must be that famous genius, Charles Evans. That's quite an eye-opener. I thought it would be another famous young wizard who would show such arrogance, but I didn't expect such an arrogant person to come from the usually honest Hufflepuff. Snape then let out a cold laugh. There are always some foolish wizards who think that because they have some talent in waving a wand, they can disregard potions class. They think that their talent in charms and transfiguration can be directly applied to potions. But I must say, this artistic subject is not like foolishly waving a wand. I don't expect you Hufflepuffs, known for your dullness, to truly appreciate the beauty of a cauldron simmering over a low flame, emitting white smoke and a fragrant aroma. You will never truly understand the wondrous magic of the liquid that flows into people's veins, captivating the heart and confusing the will. You are always the same kind of stupid fools I often encounter. I only wish to get rid of you quickly, let you graduate early, and never appear in my class again. And as a result, Charles Evans, this genius, has taken the lead and isn't even coming to potions class. I don't recall approving his request for exemption. Then, Snape announced something that made the young Hufflepuff's blood run cold. Hufflepuff loses 100 points, for Charles Evans's absence, and for the arrogance and disrespect towards a professor revealed by his actions. The next moment, the young Hufflepuffs couldn't help but stir. They had already heard from their seniors about the punishments for being late or absent. Being late was quite common at the beginning of the first term, as the young wizards were unfamiliar with the castle's layout, and the professors were tolerant of this. Even if they were 20 minutes late, the professor would at most give a reminder, not deduct points. Of course, if it reached the point of absence, some strict professors would definitely deduct points. But the first absence usually only resulted in about 10 points being deducted, and some more lenient professors would only give a verbal warning. How could anyone like Snape deduct 100 points right away? Not only that, but Snape's mouth continued to spew venom. Charles Evans thinks he's something special. I tell you, I've seen plenty of geniuses. What are geniuses? Many geniuses fade into obscurity halfway through, and many geniuses die because of their foolish, reckless, and arrogant actions, even taking others with them. In my opinion, Charles Evans is very likely to be that kind of so-called genius who dies from arrogance. I'll give you a piece of advice: stay away from such people if you don't want to die a miserable death with him. Hannah Abbott, the shy girl from the sorting ceremony, had helped old Tom deliver meals to Charles several times at the Leaky Cauldron. Hearing Snape assert that Charles would likely die a miserable death, she couldn't hold back any longer and stood up, saying, "Professor, Charles won't die. He's not arrogant either, he's a very good person." Before she could finish, Snape revealed a cold sneer. "Is that so? Hannah Abbott, before you defend Charles Evans, did you raise your hand? Did you stand up and get my permission?" Violating classroom discipline, Hufflepuff loses another 10 points. Another Hufflepuff girl couldn't help but raise her hand. After Snape nodded with a cold smile, indicating for her to stand up, Susan Bones said, "Professor, there's a reason Charles didn't come to class. He must be too tired after 2 exams, and besides, the class bell just rang, so it's only being late, not absent yet." Before she could finish, she was forced to sit down by Snape's stern gaze. Snape's cold sneer intensified. "Excuses. Making excuses. Quibbling. Also, since when did Hufflepuff start playing smart and trying to exploit the rules?" Hufflepuff loses another 20 points. Snape's malice towards Hufflepuff was already clear for all to see. After Susan Bones sat down with a pale face, the little badgers all lowered their heads, fearfully avoiding Snape's gaze. Only then did Snape seem satisfied, and he said in a low voice, "All right, since you've finally learned your lesson, we can finally begin today's class. I'm really looking forward to your performance in the first class." The little badgers and the little eagles beside them breathed a slight sigh of relief. If it was class time, surely Snape would calm down, right? But the next moment, Snape didn't start the formal content of the class. Instead, he called out names in Hufflepuff like a machine gun, asking them about content that was clearly in later lessons. This wasn't in the front of the textbook at all. Even the Ravenclaws who normally had the habit of previewing hadn't seen this far, at least 70 to 80% of them, let alone the Hufflepuffs who weren't known for their intelligence. Under Snape's questioning, they were naturally completely defeated. Snape's expression was cold. "So your brains aren't focused on studying, are they? No previewing? Do you think you're here at Hogwarts for sightseeing and entertainment? Points off, points off, points off." In the blink of an eye, just from this questioning session, Snape deducted another 30 points from Hufflepuff. The venom he spewed during this time made the little badgers lower their heads even further. Some had bright red faces, while others were deathly pale. The little badgers who were called up to answer questions all fell into a daze without exception. Even so, Snape seemed to have flipped a switch, and the venom he spewed didn't stop for the entire class. He patrolled around the little badgers for the entire class. As soon as he found a small mistake, it was immediately a storm of ridicule, sarcasm, and even outright insults. "Pigs, what's in your brain? Did you not digest the apple pie you ate last night? I said cut the porcupine quills into 3-centimeter sections. What did you cut? Are you trying to cut porcupine dust? And you, did you figure out the stirring order? Which is left and which is right, which is clockwise and which is clockwise? Answer my question. You, do you think lowering your head can hide this pot of garbage? Can't your eyes see clearly? Can't your nose smell the scent? Why aren't you pouring out this pot of garbage you produced?" The little Hufflepuffs lowered their heads one after another. This potions class had become their nightmare. The girls all had red eyes and were crying, and even the little boys who had been taught to be strong were half crying. Many little wizards had fallen into a daze and didn't dare to touch the potion ingredients at all. Not to mention the trembling Ravenclaws beside them. Even Snape himself felt like he had gone a bit too far by the end of his rant. But for him to back down? Absolutely impossible. Just then, the class bell rang, and Snape snorted coldly. "Class dismissed." In the empty classroom, Charles heard Deep Blue's voice in his mind. Multiple casting technique secondary deduction complete. Host has obtained special casting technique, triple casting. At this moment, Charles' eyes showed joy. This was already comparable to Professor Flitwick's level, capable of instantly casting 3 identical spells. It was a pity that further deduction required too many points. Although Charles could afford it, he still didn't want to use them so rashly. A technique like triple casting, which could be called a divine skill, was already enough for him at the moment. An eager expression appeared on his face, wanting to test the power of triple casting. This time, Charles was not satisfied with testing it on the Lumos spell. He raised a hand. Flash spell, triple casting. The next moment, a light far more dazzling than when he fought Professor Flitwick erupted. The light was so intense that even wearing sunglasses would likely be useless. Even creating a dark area with magic might be forcibly pierced by the blinding light. Then, Charles tried the laser spell again. Under triple casting, the laser spell could instantly unleash 3 lasers crisscrossing horizontally and vertically, greatly restricting the enemy's dodging space. To form the laser net Charles had used before, it would also be much faster through triple casting. However, these few spells were almost eliminated from Charles' current combat system. He only used them before to avoid exposing overly exaggerated strength. The combat methods Charles currently used frequently, besides those high-power spells, were only the Knight's Edge spell, which he could try here. Knight's Edge, triple casting. As the incantation was spoken, an invisible sharp edge suddenly shot out from the tip of Charles' mithril wand. Originally, after his mental transformation, the invisible light blade of the Knight's Edge spell Charles unleashed could reach a length of about 2 meters. Now, after triple casting, the length of this light blade reached an outrageous 6 meters. And because the activation speed was extremely fast, it almost instantly crossed the length of the classroom and pierced into the wall on the other side. Charles' eyes widened. Both the killing speed and distance instantly surged, a qualitative leap in improvement. Originally, Charles needed to be close to the enemy, but now at medium range, they would be directly pierced by the invisible light blade. If sufficient magical protection wasn't set up in advance, probably few wizards could react to this attack. Charles took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Awesome. Since the Knight's Edge spell had such a qualitative change, he couldn't wait to find a place to try whether he could handle high-power spells like Eternal Blazing Sun, Sun of No Light, Sacred Land, and Only I Am the Honored God under multiple casting. He even wanted to try if he could use this technique in his ancient dragon form. The Forbidden Forest has enough space, but the Room of Requirement is more convenient. Charles stepped out of the classroom, planning to go to the Room of Requirement to test the performance of these high-power spells under multiple casting. Before entering the corridor, he cast a disillusionment charm on himself. After all, he had become famous at Hogwarts today, and he didn't want people to pay attention to his actions. Walking along the corridor, as Charles was thinking about the location of the Room of Requirement, suddenly, crying little Hufflepuffs came from the front, as if a dark cloud was hanging over them. A hint of surprise appeared in Charles' eyes. He didn't know what they had encountered to be crying so miserably. He didn't plan to get involved in these matters. After all, he really didn't like being a babysitter, and he disliked children even more. They were too noisy. Besides, no matter what setback the little badgers encountered, it was a part of growth. Some setbacks were just meant to be endured. Only children from high-status families would be pampered everywhere. Ordinary people would be battered by society sooner or later. Setbacks in school, which seemed like the end of the world while studying, turned out to be nothing after graduation. But perhaps it was by enduring some setbacks in school that one could gradually adapt to failure and frustration after graduation. Charles didn't want to interfere with the normal growth of children. He had already decided to leave until he heard the disgruntled little Ravenclaws next to them complaining to the little badgers. Professor Snape is simply deliberately targeting us. When Charles didn't come to class, he was already furious and directly deducted 100 points. You shouldn't have defended Charles when he was angry. Just go along with what Professor Snape says, or at worst, just lower your head and don't say anything. Look at what he said about you later. That was simply humiliation, it was a personal attack. In this class, Hufflepuff's points were deducted by more than half. Was it worth it? Hannah Abbott's face turned red as she retorted. No, Charles added so many points to Hufflepuff, he is our hero. Besides, the points were added by Charles, even if half were deducted, that's still a lot of points. We Hufflepuffs are loyal to our friends and classmates, we won't just go along with what's said because we're afraid of being scolded or losing points. The little eagles of Ravenclaw shook their heads, clearly disagreeing with this approach. Just then, Charles' voice suddenly reached the ears of Hannah and the little badgers. Charles looked at Hannah and asked, "Little Hannah, were you scolded by Professor Snape? Tell me, what did Snape say about you?" Hannah and the others' faces turned red and they shook their heads, but tears were already welling up in their eyes. Charles looked at Hannah. "Tell me, it's okay, I can handle it." Hannah's eyes instantly turned even redder, tears streamed down, and she sobbed as she repeated what Snape had said. Charles listened quietly, his expression growing increasingly somber and cold. To be honest, Charles wasn't annoyed when Snape first started talking about him. He hadn't attended class, which was a violation of the rules, so Snape could say what he wanted. He was too lazy to argue with Snape over this. At most, when he was calculating Snape's potion ingredients, he would make sure not to leave a single scrap for him, or perhaps break a few of his bones when he robbed Snape on a dark and stormy night. As for losing points, Charles cared even less. He was an adult. If they wanted to add points, they could add them, and if they wanted to deduct them, they could deduct them. Who cared about these kindergarten gold stars? He had earned Hufflepuff 400 points. Even if all 400 were deducted, no one could complain to him. Charles wasn't angry about any of this. But what made Charles angry was that Snape had implicated the people who had spoken up for him and defended him. What he found even more intolerable was that Snape still wasn't satisfied and continued to attack the little badgers with vicious words afterward, crushing their dignity. What kind of person would do such a thing? Charles stopped walking, his eyes as cold as ice. He didn't care about many things after all. He was an adult who had struggled in his previous life. He hadn't made much money, but his moral bottom line and sense of responsibility had long since plummeted. But today, Charles felt that if he didn't do something, the tens of millions of points he had spent on deductions might as well be fed to turtles. He stopped his plan to go to the room of requirement and looked at Hannah and the little badgers. "A few of you go find Professor Sprout and report everything Snape said to you today, word for word. The others go find Professor Flitwick, the head of Ravenclaw, who was also present. Then go find Deputy Headmistress Professor McGonagall, and go find the headmaster of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, and tell them exactly how Snape insulted you." Charles' voice softened slightly. "If something happens, you must trust our own professors and heads of house. Don't just endure it silently, understand?" Then, Charles turned his body. Hannah asked behind him, "What about you, Charles?" Charles turned back and forced a chilling smile. "Since some people have no manners and don't know how to learn from their mistakes, I'll go teach him a lesson and make him remember one thing clearly. Some words spoken, some things done, come with a price." Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 93. You're not so great either, are you? Charles makes his move, legilimency. At this moment, in the Slytherin head's office, Malfoy was excitedly reporting to Snape about the reactions of the other houses after the class. They were all terrified. "Now they'll understand, the House Cup belongs to a Slytherin. And Godfather, your authority at Hogwarts is absolute. Those Gryffindor fools who came to your class will probably be trembling in fear from now on." Snape's lips curled slightly, as if he had thought of something, and he continued to ask, "What about that first-year Hufflepuff student, Charles Evans?" Malfoy's eyes lit up. "Couldn't find a trace of him. I knew it. No matter how much of a genius he is, he's just a first-year student. How could he dare to defy a professor? He's probably hiding in fear now, not daring to face those Hufflepuffs." Just then, Snape's ears twitched, as if he heard some movement. A look of confusion appeared in his eyes. "Why does it feel like someone is outside the door? Who is outside the door, making such a racket? Don't they know how to knock?" The next moment, a grating, teeth-grinding sound came from the doorway into the office. On the thick door, a clear mark of intense heat appeared, quickly spreading into a passage large enough for one person to enter and exit. Then, a warning sign flashed wildly in Snape's heart, as if he felt there was a vicious dragon behind the door, ready to devour someone. He instinctively drew his wand. Shield charm. Immediately after, the severed door panel slammed over like a cannonball, crashing against the invisible barrier in the air with a loud bang. Wood chips flew, and shattered pieces of wood hit the office walls, making the entire office seem to shake. From the dust, a figure walked in. It was Charles, whom Malfoy and Snape had just mentioned. Charles tilted his head, looking at the terrified Malfoy lying on the ground and Snape, who was protected by the shield charm. A bright smile spread across his lips. "As expected, I didn't smash you to death. That's great, we'll have some fun now." Immediately, Charles waved his mithril wand, and the shattered door returned to its original state at a visible speed. Not only that, but it was also wrapped with thick iron chains, locking it tightly. An ominous feeling rose in the hearts of Snape and Malfoy. What exactly was Charles trying to do like this? Breaking into the Slytherin head's office, had he gone mad? Malfoy shrieked. "How are you here? You, what do you want to do?" Snape hissed like a venomous snake. "Who allowed you to come in like this?" 100 points from Hufflepuff, no, 200 points from Hufflepuff. "Get out of here." I will discuss this matter with the Hufflepuff head and then decide your punishment, but I guarantee, Charles Evans, your detention will not be less than 3 months. But the next moment, Charles said faintly, you two don't seem to understand the situation yet. So noisy. Immediately after, Charles lifted his foot and stepped on the wrist bone of Malfoy's hand, which was clutching his wand on the ground, breaking it. A crisp crack echoed, bringing silence to the Slytherin head's office. Snape and Malfoy were stunned, completely unexpected that Charles would do such a thing. Immediately, bone-piercing pain shot from Malfoy's wrist to his brain, causing him to let out a hysterical wail of pain. How dare you? You broke my wrist. My father won't let you off. Charles smiled, lifted his foot slightly, and then stepped down again. Stepped down, and then stepped down again. It wasn't until Malfoy's wrist and ankle bones were broken that Charles looked down at Malfoy, whose pupils had already dilated, and said, still crying? I see you really like tattling and running fast, but I particularly dislike that. I'll stomp on your ankle so you run slower. I'll stomp on your wrist so you can't be so smug and wave your hands around, or even dare to point your finger at me. Do you like this gift I gave you? When you sober up, you can call your father over. I don't mind breaking all your bones again in front of your father, then you'll know that your weak father can't do anything at all. The cries of the weak are truly unpleasant. Charles patted Malfoy's face, causing Malfoy to completely pass out, whether from the intense pain or extreme fear. His series of swift and decisive actions left Snape, a former Death Eater, completely unable to react. By the time Snape finally came back to his senses, he abruptly pointed his wand at Charles, his face filled with unprecedented horror. You attacked a classmate? Charles Evans, do you know what crime you've committed? I'm going to request Headmaster Dumbledore expel you and throw you into Azkaban. Upon hearing this, Charles almost doubled over with laughter. What did I do? Professor Snape, you, a former Death Eater, can't even tell what I did. It's simple, really. I broke 4 of his bones and gave him a lesson he'll never forget. After all, injuries like this are easily healed in the wizarding world, but he should remember the pain very clearly, right? It's just that I don't know the Cruciatus Curse, otherwise this lesson might be even more unforgettable. Professor Snape, you should be very familiar with that kind of thing. Having his identity as a Death Eater called out so directly, Snape's pupils constricted, and his mind went blank. Charles Evans, what exactly do you want? He didn't even notice that his usual mocking tone towards students from other houses had become somewhat weak and yielding. This time, it was Charles' expression that showed mockery. What do I want? To do what you, Professor, like to do to young wizards. Bully the weak, that's all. An exaggerated curve appeared at the corner of Charles' mouth. Surely Professor Snape, you never thought that a student would dare to attack you, or that a student would be capable of attacking you, did you? Tisk, tisk tisk, so you're well aware of how vulnerable students are to you, huh? Too bad, you ran into me. You shouldn't have messed with my foolish little friends. This time won't just pass by lightly like your previous acts of violence, Professor, because I am much stronger than you. In that instant, Snape felt as if a terrifying shadow had fallen over him. An overwhelming aura, crushing down on him, caused him to instinctively strike first, attacking Charles. Expelliarmus. Light flashed, hitting Charles squarely, and then effortlessly sliding off Charles' dragon armor spell. Stupefy. Another spell hit, and again it was blocked without any suspense. Not even Charles' forward stride was hindered in the slightest. Snape's pupils constricted like pinpricks. He couldn't understand how Charles was doing all of this. Why did a first-year wizard have such an aura, such strength, and this terrifying indifference that emanated from him, as if everything in his path would be casually crushed? Levi Corpus. Snape frantically used his self-created control spell. After the Levi Corpus spell also failed, he could no longer tolerate Charles' approach and let out a low growl, using an undoubtedly dark magic spell. Sectum Sempra. This was indeed Snape's specialty. Magic condensed into an invisible blade, whistling as it hit Charles. The Sectum Sempra, with its anti-magic effect, finally shook the dragon armor spell once, creating a slight gap in its protection. But before the joy on Snape's face could solidify, Charles raised his wand. Is that all? Sectum Sempra, nothing special. Then, Professor, please take a look at my blade. Immediately after, Charles whispered, Night's Edge, triple cast. In an instant, an invisible blade of light burst from the tip of the mithril wand, crossing the distance between Charles and Snape, piercing through Snape's body, and pinning him directly to the wall like a spear. Blood dripped and flowed, then was instantly evaporated into a thin mist by the light blade of the Night's Edge spell. Snape looked at Charles, and fear finally appeared in his eyes. He had no doubt that Charles would kill him in the next moment. However, Charles didn't make a move, he just disarmed Snape's wand and continued to approach Snape step by step. This gave Snape a little hope, making him believe that Charles was afraid of Dumbledore, afraid of being expelled from Hogwarts. He spoke with difficulty. "It's not too late to stop now, I can explain to Dumbledore, maybe you won't be expelled." Before Snape could finish his words, Charles laughed. "Dumbledore? Expulsion from Hogwarts?" Charles' laughter became more and more exaggerated. "You don't really think I'm afraid of being expelled from Hogwarts, do you? Please, you're a Death Eater. Besides Dumbledore being willing to shelter you, keep you at Hogwarts, and even give you a professor and even head of house position, where else can you go? Of course you can't leave Hogwarts. But me, with my talent and strength, the world is vast, I can soar freely. Why should I be concerned? Besides, old bat, have you been lording it over people all these years, getting used to throwing your weight around with students? Expulsion? You're not naive enough to think you can expel me, are you?" Charles pulled up Snape's sleeve, revealing the dark mark on his arm. Snape subconsciously tried to cover it up, but Charles pinned his arm to the wall again. Immediately, Charles took out a camera and took a picture of Snape's dark mark. Snape was completely panicked now. He realized that he had no idea what Charles' goal was, only that this first-year student Charles absolutely could not be viewed with a student's mindset. This guy was a lunatic, a demon. "What exactly do you want to do?" Snape groaned in pain. Charles said faintly, "Actually, I've always been very curious. You're a Death Eater, you finally got taken in, you have a sanctuary, and yet you're still so arrogant. What gives you the right? Do you really think Dumbledore can cover up everything? He can't wash away your dark mark. If you were a little more docile, maybe people could temporarily forget what you've done, but for all these years, you've been cheering for Slytherin House, that look of defending pureblood glory. Are you afraid that people won't remember that you were once a Death Eater? Maybe you're really not afraid, then let's verify if that's the case. Send this photo to the Daily Prophet, send it to all the parents of Hogwarts students, and remind them that there's a Death Eater here, and he's also verbally abusing a large number of young wizards, and maybe even physically punishing them. Maybe it can awaken some dusty memories." Snape's body began to tremble with fear. "Don't." He stammered out words of pleading. "Don't do this. Please." Charles stared at Snape. This greasy, gloomy old bat was a pure love warrior in the original work, a highly popular character, called one of the bravest people by Harry Potter. However, what did that have to do with Charles? Charles sneered. "Professor Snape is begging for mercy now, so you do have things you care about. Ah, you care about your life at Hogwarts, you care about the identity you've managed to conceal, you care about your reputation and honor as a potions master, and you don't want the Death Eater mark to ruin all of this. But why didn't you think about all those young wizards? They care about being insulted by a professor, they care about losing points for the House Cup, they care about the evaluations they receive. Since you don't care about others, why should others care about you? It's really hard to anger me, but once I'm angered and decide to act, the principle I adhere to is regardless of the consequences, until death, leaving no future troubles." Charles raised his hand, and the photo flew out the window. An owl carrying the photo flew into the distance. Charles' eyes held a mischievous smile. The destination of this photo was the Ministry of Magic Minister's office. Fudge had taken Charles to Azkaban before, and Charles had clearly understood the hints in his words. Although this Minister of Magic didn't know exactly what he was thinking, his intention to target Dumbledore seemed quite obvious. Considering how much Fudge had reimbursed him, this photo of Snape's dark mark on his arm would be a good gift for him. Charles didn't want this generous Minister of Magic to fall from power. He even hoped he would thrive. The moment the owl carried the photo away, Snape felt as if he had fallen into hell. No matter where the photo ended up, he knew his life at Hogwarts was completely over. "You win." Snape's voice was low, but the hatred and resentment in his eyes were almost tangible. "Can you let me down now?" These words, however, made Charles laugh. "Professor, when you were Death Eaters, were you always so tender with your enemies? You give the enemy a minor, insignificant blow, and then you let them go? Wow, are you playing house?" Charles repeated each word slowly. "Since I've made my move, since I've become your enemy, I will completely eliminate you as a threat. After all, if a potions master, a Death Eater, were to hide in the shadows plotting revenge, that would be quite troublesome. You don't think I didn't notice the resentment in your eyes, or are you saying you think I'm someone who doesn't hold grudges? Professor, we have a life and death relationship. This is just the beginning. You don't think this is over, do you?" Charles whispered in Snape's ear. "Don't worry, everyone will applaud your death. I still have ways to make that happen. As for the knowledge in your mind, I will extract it bit by bit. Without that, you're nothing special. Fate has long been a mess. So many people have died, one more won't make a difference, right? Snape looked at Charles, his mind in turmoil. Just as his mental defenses were in disarray, Charles' mithril wand pressed against Snape's temple. Charles gazed into Snape's chaotic eyes. Physical pain is no pain at all to you. Only the memories buried in your heart can truly make you feel like you want to die, Professor. Do you enjoy mental torment? Does it make you feel happy? Then, Professor, you must be strong later, you must smile. The next moment, Charles softly chanted the spell, Legilimency. At the same time, Charles also whispered to Deep Blue in his mind. Deep Blue, the Legilimency spell, directly target the direction of excavating memories, stealing knowledge, and breaking through brain defenses. For deductions. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 94. Hogwarts shakes. I declare Charles the strongest. The silver light of the Legilimency spell surged from Charles' wand, hitting Snape at point-blank range. Snape instantly felt as if his brain had been struck by a massive hammer. His mind was already in turmoil, and his occlumency had loosened. At this moment, his brain's defenses were smashed open, allowing the magic of Legilimency to invade. Immediately, Snape's memories began to play out. A child who grew up in the dark Nocturne alley, with a deep sense of inferiority due to his mixed blood, met a Muggleborn witch named Lily by chance. At that moment, Lily was bathed in sunlight, the withered petals of the lily in her hand slowly reviving, making her look like a pure angel. The moment Lily appeared in the memory, Snape's occlumency instantly recovered. His occlumency was arguably the strongest in the magical world, capable of deceiving even Dumbledore and Voldemort's probes, and even capable of fabricating memories when Legilimency wasn't cast directly with a wand. Naturally, resisting Charles' casually cast Legilimency was effortless. Get out! How dare you pry into my memories? Snape's voice roared in his mind like thunder. Charles' Legilimency, facing Snape's counterattack, was like facing a 100-meter-high wave, collapsing upon contact and retreating continuously. However, just as Snape's eyes revealed killing intent, and he was even about to use this mental clash between Legilimency and occlumency to leave an incurable wound on Charles in the spiritual world. The next moment, the intensity of Charles' Legilimency surged at an astonishing speed. The speed of this growth stunned even Snape. How is this possible? How can there be such a speed of progress? Then, Snape gritted his teeth, his gaze fierce, and continued to launch a mental counterattack against Charles, hoping to overwhelm Charles' spirit in one go. What he didn't know was that while clashing with Snape's occlumency using Legilimency, Deep Blue's prompts kept ringing in Charles' mind. Host has obtained advanced material for occlumency. The required points for deducing occlumency will significantly decrease. Host has obtained advanced material related to Legilimency. The required points for deducing Legilimency will significantly decrease. Host has obtained material related to mental magic. The required points for experiencing mental magic will significantly decrease. A series of prompts almost flooded the screen. The Legilimency that Charles was deducing not only saw its progress surge wildly, but the required points also kept decreasing. At the same time, Charles' already impressive occlumency was also tempered in this mental clash, becoming even more resilient. All of this combined made Snape's mental counterattack feel like it was hitting an unshakable reef. No matter how high the waves, the reef remained motionless. The waves washed away, leaving only Deep Blue eternal. Legilimency's initial deduction is complete. The host's Legilimency has become instinctual and can be used wandlessly and wordlessly. Legilimency's secondary deduction is complete. The host's Legilimency possesses the ability to see through people's hearts. The host can tell at a glance whether the person in front of them is lying, and even perceive their mental weaknesses. Deep Blue's prompts continued, and this was precisely what made Snape feel horrified. The intensity of Charles' Legilimency was surging at a terrifying speed, and it seemed to be more cunning, heading straight for the loopholes in his occlumency. The scene that had been cut off earlier continued to reappear, Lily's appearance flashing in the memories. The years of growing up together with Lily were the best times in Snape's memory. Even appearing in such an offense and defense, it brought a hint of tenderness to Snape's eyes. However, Charles was not there to let Snape relive such happiness. The next second, Snape saw the sorting. This was the first thing that made him feel pain. Lily went to Gryffindor, while he went to Slytherin, and the distance between them began to appear. Then came more and more scenes. Estrangement, more and more estrangement appeared. The innocence of childhood sweethearts faded, and the fundamental differences between the two became more and more apparent. Lily increasingly moved towards light and love, while Snape became more and more narrow-minded, fanatically worshipping the power of dark magic. Arguments, more and more arguments. Especially when Lily began to be pursued by James Potter, the arguments intensified repeatedly. Until that time, Snape was hung upside down by James Potter and publicly humiliated, his dignity swept away. When this memory surfaced, Snape was terrified. No, no. He roared in his mind, even pleading with Charles. Repeating this humiliating experience was certainly painful for him. But after so many years, Snape was no longer the student he once was. He had endured all sorts of humiliation. This particular incident wasn't enough to break him. What truly terrified Snape was what happened next. After being saved by Lily, he angrily uttered those three unforgivable words, "Mudblood." From then on, Lily broke off their friendship, and the two went their separate ways completely. As Charles mercilessly flashed back to this memory, Snape's mind felt as if it had been struck hard, and the cracks in his occlumency spread at a visible speed. For his entire life, he regretted those three words. And at this moment, Charles sneered in the mental world. "Professor Snape, you are truly foolish. Do you think if you had used a different insult instead of the unforgivable word mudblood, you could have salvaged things? You've regretted mudblood your whole life, but you don't regret your other malicious words. Saying the wrong thing, especially saying hurtful words, words that trample on others' dignity, comes at an irreparable cost. It seems you haven't truly repented enough. It's all right, let's continue," Charles said faintly. "James Potter, he is Harry Potter's father, right? In that case, Lily is Harry Potter's mother. Then I'm very curious, everyone says they were killed by the mysterious person, so why did the mysterious person personally kill them, and why target Harry Potter, an infant? I'm sure your memories hold the answer." Snape's mind was on the verge of collapse, his occlumency covered in spiderweb-like cracks, riddled with holes. He already knew he couldn't stop Charles. All he could do was plead, begging not to be forced to relive that heartbreaking event. But Charles refused him without the slightest hint of pity. "Heh, how touching, how deeply emotional, but what does that have to do with me?" The next moment, Snape's actions from back then surfaced in his memory. He had overheard the prophecy about the boy who lived, but only half of it, not knowing who the boy who lived actually was. To curry favor with Voldemort, he told Voldemort this prophecy. He hadn't expected that Voldemort would target Lily's child, Harry Potter. Snape desperately begged Voldemort, pleading with him to spare Lily, but he never expected that Lily would not fear Voldemort and would sacrifice herself to protect Harry Potter. As this bloody memory surfaced, especially Snape's anticipation and smugness when he went to Voldemort to claim credit, and his humble and pathetic state when begging Voldemort, Snape became like a withered piece of wood. Kill me, kill me. I killed Lily. Didn't you want to make me suffer? You've done it, kill me." Snape's mental voice was hoarse. Charles, however, sneered again. "After Lily died, you repented, didn't you? But what did you repent for? You only repented that your informing led to Lily's death, you were angry that Harry Potter implicated Lily, you were angry that James Potter didn't protect her well. But you never remembered that doing one wrong thing can potentially cost you a lifetime of regret. When you tried to use a child's life to achieve your own merit, you paid with the life of your lifelong love. Now, when you trample on the dignity of a group of children for the glory of Slytherin, for your sense of superiority, leaving them with shadows, you will pay with your reputation, honor, life, and everything. Do you think this is the end? No, far from it." At this moment, in Charles's mind, Deep Blue's voice sounded again. Legilimency deduction completed 4 times, host has obtained mental magic, Mirror of Reincarnation. In the Mirror of Reincarnation spell, the host can create everything like reincarnation based on the cursed person's memories, allowing the cursed person's happiest and most painful experiences to cycle repeatedly, and even allowing the cursed person to experience a brand new life. During this process, the host can obtain all the secrets and the most crucial knowledge from the cursed person's memories. Light shone in Charles' eyes. Snape's nature was not generous. His good qualities were without exception displayed towards Lily and Lily's continuation, Harry Potter. Charles Evans? What kind of relationship did he have with Lily? Precisely because of this, since he decided to act against Snape, Charles didn't want to leave such a hidden danger. However, the knowledge Snape possessed was quite important to Charles. Not only the material for occlumency, but also the knowledge of potions. To acquire the second magical animagus transformation, Charles needed a reversion potion to increase the bloodline concentration of Fluffy, the 3-headed dog, in order to achieve the transformation into a 3-headed hellhound. Originally, he had planned to find an opportunity to make a deal with Snape and have Snape conduct the relevant research for him. As long as Snape came up with an idea, Charles could use relatively fewer points to have Deep Blue deduce and complete it. But now, Snape was useless. After extracting his value, Charles would develop the reversion potion himself. The mithril wand was pressed against Snape's temple again, followed by a mental spell derived from legilimency. Mirror of Reincarnation. Triple casting. Without any reservation, Charles had to complete all of this before Dumbledore and the other professors arrived. The mental burden brought by the triple casting of the Mirror of Reincarnation caused blood to trickle from Charles' nostrils. His mind felt as groggy as if he hadn't slept for 3 days and nights, accompanied by waves of stinging pain. But what followed was Snape's mind completely falling into a state of confusion. In front of Snape's eyes, the memories related to Lily cycled repeatedly. Happiness and pain constantly intertwined. The happiness of meeting and interacting with Lily made the subsequent pain even more prominent. The more painful it was, the more precious the happiness seemed. Under the cycle, Snape's clemency completely fell apart. His own mind was also completely lost in the Mirror of Reincarnation, on the verge of collapse. Until a certain moment. Snape? Lily's voice sounded in his ear. Snape opened his eyes blankly, and before him was Lily with a look of concern. How did you fall asleep? We're almost at Hogwarts, we need to get ready to get off. Snape stared blankly at the scenery on both sides, realizing he was on the speeding Hogwarts Express. He looked in the mirror and found that he seemed to have returned to the age of 11. Everything in his memory seemed like a nightmare rapidly fading away. Ecstasy surged in Snape's heart, making him unable to resist grabbing Lily's hand, which caused Lily to widen her eyes, her cheeks flushing. This time, I won't let those things happen again. Snape secretly vowed in his heart. Everything that was about to happen appeared in his mind. He carefully handled his relationship with Lily, and everything after the sorting at Hogwarts. He no longer embraced black magic, no longer listened to incitement and joined the Death Eaters, but kept his distance from his fairweather friends. His relationship with Lily remained very close, and the deep-seated estrangement and quarrels that had left him with indelible pain never happened again. He also used the potion knowledge that had left an impression in his memory, becoming a dazzling new star in the field of potions. By his 5th year, he had already become a potions master, and fame, honor, and wealth followed. James Potter, who had made him feel somewhat inferior, was nothing in front of him. Finally, one night, he brought Lily to the Black Lake, confessed under the bright moonlight, and received Lily's nod. At that moment, Snape felt a joy that came from his soul. He just needed to eliminate one more small threat, and Lily would belong to him forever. James Potter, in this life, he would not let him bother Lily again. How to do it was also simple, one potion was enough. Under Snape's arrangements and designs, everything went so smoothly. James Potter fell strangely ill and passed away, and no one suspected Snape, who had always treated James with politeness and respect. Until one time, Lily saw his notes and saw the potion that caused the exact same symptoms as James Potter. At that moment, Snape's world collapsed again. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was back on the Hogwarts Express. Snape blinked in surprise, followed by the same ecstasy. This time, I need to learn from the lesson again. I can't let Lily see the notes, or rather, there's no need to leave any notes. Who keeps notes if they're a decent person? So everything unfolded as before, only this time it was smoother. James Potter died, and Lily never found out until graduation. Snape, as he wished, began a new life. Until an obscure Podewinner, whom he had never paid attention to back then, came to his door and maliciously revealed the truth about James Potter's death, which he had researched and investigated. Snape didn't hesitate to end him, but the consequence of this was that the truth was exposed again. He returned to that Hogwarts Express once more. Snape clenched his fists, deciding not to bother with James Potter in this life. However, this time, James Potter passionately pursued Lily. The thing Snape feared happened. No matter how famous he was, no matter how powerful he was, no matter how insignificant James Potter was in front of him, Lily still loved James Potter more. No matter what, he and Lily seemed unable to reach the end together. Countless cycles, always the same ending, until the last cycle. This time, James Potter didn't exist. Snape, as if in a dream, married Lily and had children. This time there was no war, no dark clouds, everything was peaceful and beautiful. Snape watched the Lily in his heart change little by little. Lily couldn't understand the field of potions he had deeply cultivated. Lily couldn't provide the help he needed. As for emotional solace, Snape no longer needed any of that. He discovered something terrifying: he had never truly understood Lily. Aside from their childhood, they hadn't had a heart-to-heart conversation about anything for a long time. What terrified Snape even more was that a younger potions apprentice, who was more like Lily in her youth, appeared by his side. She could understand the pain he felt when encountering potions problems, she could understand his ambitions, and she could even understand his unrequited, agonizing love for Lily and the fear buried deep in his heart. At this moment, a question Snape had never considered before sharply pierced his heart. What exactly did he love about Lily? Was it the gratitude and cherish that the insecure, friendless, and unhappy half-blood little wizard felt when he finally gained a friend after seeing the little witch? Was the love that followed truly love, or was it the pain of unrequited desire? Not allowing such doubts to spread in his heart, Snape seemed to understand something and looked up at the sky. You won't succeed. My love for Lily is unshakable. Snape gritted his teeth, raised his wand at himself, and voluntarily released, ending this cycle. After this cycle, Snape's mind had completely collapsed and gone mad, to the point where the mirror of reincarnation could no longer function. Snape himself fell to the floor of his office like a pile of mud. Charles showed a look of surprise, but for him, the goal had been achieved. Through so many cycles, Charles knew all the magic Snape knew and the potions he had learned. Deep Blue's prompts were almost flooding the screen. Host has obtained advanced material for Levi Corpus. Host has obtained advanced material for Sectum Sempra. Host has obtained advanced material for dark magic. Host has obtained advanced material for potions. Adding the legilimency and occlumency materials he had obtained earlier, Snape's value had been completely squeezed dry. Charles said faintly, "Then, it's time for the last thing." Meanwhile, the little Hufflepuffs had, as Charles instructed, gone to Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, and Dumbledore to explain how Snape had insulted and humiliated them. At this moment, regardless of their inner thoughts, the professors and the headmaster were furious. And upon hearing that Charles had angrily gone to teach Snape a lesson, Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, was even more worried and rushed towards the head of Slytherin's office. Her worry was simple. Snape was once a Death Eater, they all knew that. Who knew what Snape might do to Charles in his anger? Professor McGonagall also gave Dumbledore a meaningful look. Before she could get a response from Dumbledore's deep blue eyes, she also quickly rushed over with Professor Flitwick. No matter what, they couldn't let Charles be harmed by Snape. The mental humiliation suffered by the young Hufflepuffs had already brought shame upon Hogwarts. If a genius like Charles were to be harmed again, Hogwarts' reputation would likely be completely ruined, and they, as professors, would be heartbroken. As the professors rushed out, an even more unexpected scene unfolded before them. The corridor was packed with students from Hufflepuff. In addition, students from Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, from the lower grades to the upper grades, even the 7th-year students who were about to graduate, were all standing there. They gritted their teeth. "Professors, headmaster. We want to help Charles too. That old bat Snape deserves it. His favoritism is outrageous, and he's extremely harsh on us students from other houses. I don't know how many people are afraid of potions class, and how many have been scolded to tears in potions class. Besides Slytherin, no one likes Snape. We support Charles, and we want to help Charles beat up the old bat too." Seeing this scene, Professor McGonagall and the others looked at Dumbledore, their eyes clearly conveying their meaning. Dumbledore didn't know what to think and lowered his head. He truly hadn't expected the resentment Snape had caused at Hogwarts to reach such a level. But there was no time to think about that now. Snape's punishment could be dealt with later. For now, they had to save Charles Evans. Dumbledore and the other professors hurried towards Slytherin, followed by a throng of students. They rushed to the door of the Slytherin head of house office. Just as Dumbledore raised his wand to force open the office door, the door opened on its own. With a whoosh, the students all pulled out their wands, aiming them at the doorway with shared hostility, planning to hit the old bat Snape, who walked out with a nasty curse. But the next moment, Charles' figure appeared in their line of sight. Inside the office were a fainted Malfoy and a limp, unconscious Snape on the floor. At this moment, whether it was Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, or the students, they all stood rooted to the spot as if under a body-binding spell. Hannah and Hermione, who had been worried about Charles, opened their mouths in bewilderment. Charles, even the usually boisterous Weasley twins were stunned. He defeated the old bat? The next moment, a wave of uproar erupted, a sound like a mountain collapsing and a tsunami that truly threatened to lift the dome of Hogwarts. Countless eyes firmly imprinted the image of Charles walking out of the Slytherin head of house office into their minds. A first-year student, on the first day of class, knocked down the head of Slytherin house, seeking justice for his classmates. This was a legend that had never appeared in Hogwarts' thousand-year history. At this moment, no one doubted Charles' title as the strongest. Even the young wizards who were loyal fans of Dumbledore couldn't help but shout along with the people beside them. Charles Evans, King of Lumos, the strongest at Hogwarts. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 95, Dumbledore? Punish me? By what right? Under the dome of Hogwarts, a roar like a landslide and a tsunami swept through. Seeing Charles defeat Snape and walk out of the Slytherin head of house's office, whether it was Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, or Hufflepuff, they all cheered for Charles in a frenzy. The thunderous applause was endless, and everyone looked at Charles as if they were looking at a hero returning after completing an incredible task in a myth. The first-year Hufflepuffs were even more excited, their faces flushed and tears welling up in their eyes. Seeing Snape lying on the ground like a dead dog, the fear and shadow in their hearts towards him shattered. So Snape wasn't that great after all, he just bullied ordinary students like them. When he met a genius like Charles, wasn't he just beaten down like a dead dog? Even the professors who rushed over upon hearing the news showed stunned expressions. Even Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick, who had witnessed Charles' strength, were filled with shock. Their battles with Charles were to assess Charles' performance in transfiguration and charms, and the practical combat aspect was not strong. But in wizard duels, the situation changes in an instant. Having strong theoretical power but no practical combat experience, it's hard to say if it can be fully utilized. Compared to Charles, Snape, in the eyes of several professors, undoubtedly had a great advantage in terms of magical attainment, practical combat experience, and ruthlessness. This was why they rushed over in a hurry, wanting to protect Charles. But they really didn't expect that Charles would so cleanly beat Snape like a dead dog. Judging from Charles' condition, apart from being a little tired and pale, he didn't seem to have suffered any injuries. It seemed that their estimation of Charles' strength was probably conservative. This little wizard was still holding back when fighting them, he didn't use his full strength at all. This is truly a monster. This thought surfaced in the minds of the professors simultaneously. But at this moment, Dumbledore's face showed a rare seriousness and solemnity. It was clear that his mood was different from the other professors, and it certainly couldn't be called joy. The reason was simple: Snape was his man, or rather, the most useful chess piece in his hand. Among the 4 Hogwarts houses, the 4 heads of house were, of course, all people who loved Hogwarts and loved peace. But loving Hogwarts didn't necessarily mean loyalty to Dumbledore, nor did it necessarily mean they would act entirely according to Dumbledore's ideas and hints. Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout were not members of the Order of the Phoenix, and they didn't even participate in Dumbledore's secret society, so their attitude was naturally evident. Although Professor McGonagall was a member of the Order of the Phoenix and the head of Gryffindor, she was in the same line as Dumbledore and could be called Dumbledore's confidant. Logically, she should have been the person Dumbledore trusted the most. But she was not a puppet, but an excellent witch with a rigorous and fair personality, principles, and a strong sense of morality. For this reason, some private calculations and plans simply couldn't be told to Professor McGonagall, otherwise, it might even cause a rift with her. Precisely because of this, in the original work, regarding the matter of Harry Potter being Voldemort's 7th Horcrux and that Harry Potter had to die first to destroy Voldemort, Dumbledore did not reveal it to Professor McGonagall at all, and didn't even mention the matter of Horcruxes to Professor McGonagall. He only told Snape about this. As for why he chose Snape, the reason was quite obvious. This was a person who would do anything for Lily. Did Snape have principles? No, his principles, besides the glory of Slytherin, were to protect everything of Lily. But precisely because of this, Snape was too useful. There was no need to worry about his sense of morality, no need to worry about whether he had any ideas. Anyway, any dirty or tiring work could be thrown to Snape under the guise of protecting Lily's child. Whether it was potions, secret plans, or having him be a spy for Voldemort, as long as Harry Potter was controlled, Snape would obediently do these things. Such a powerful chess piece who was also a potions master and unscrupulous was impossible to find even with a lantern. But now, Snape was publicly beaten by Charles in front of everyone. Could he still stay at Hogwarts? It would be much more troublesome for Dumbledore to use this chess piece. Besides the matter of Snape causing Dumbledore's mood to sink, what made Dumbledore even more vigilant was Charles' current prestige among the Hogwarts students. It had only been a day or two since the start of school, and all the students were already cheering for Charles. The professors were all applauding him. This momentum was too strong, even more dazzling than the savior Harry Potter, whom Dumbledore had painstakingly planned to promote. This was troublesome. In Dumbledore's heart, like Voldemort, he firmly believed in that prophecy. The prophecy had also been confirmed once. Harry Potter had indeed made the flourishing Voldemort vanish into thin air. But Voldemort has many tricks up his sleeve, and he will surely make a comeback. When that time comes, only Harry Potter, as foretold in the prophecy, will be able to defeat Voldemort. What does it matter how talented Charles is now? He is not the child of prophecy, so he is destined to be nothing more than a supporting character paving the way for Harry Potter, a stepping stone for Harry Potter to eliminate Voldemort. What happens after Voldemort is eliminated is none of Dumbledore's concern. But before that, no one's brilliance can overshadow Harry Potter, otherwise, if Harry Potter doesn't accumulate enough prestige by then, the great cause of confronting Voldemort might be affected. Therefore, the words that Dumbledore had stopped mentioning many years ago, but which had always guided his every action, echoed in his heart. For the greater good. For the greater good, he could leave the Philosopher's Stone here as a test, knowing that Voldemort would break into Hogwarts, regardless of the potential casualties among the young wizards during the process. For the greater good, he could manipulate the academic lives of so many students into a backdrop for Harry Potter's path to becoming the savior. No matter how hard they tried, the brilliant person who won the House Cup was destined to be Harry Potter and Gryffindor. For the greater good, he could arrange for the Harry Potter trio, set up numerous trials, and guide them onto the path they were meant to take according to the plan. So now, for the greater good, what's wrong with sacrificing Charles a little, and suppressing his brilliance? Although it will cause him some grievance, it is also for Charles' own good. He is too brilliant. Receiving such praise and possessing such strength at such a young age is not necessarily a good thing for the future. His temperament needs to be tempered. As Dumbledore's thoughts flickered, Madame Pomfrey from the hospital wing hurried to the Slytherin head of house office. She first checked on Draco Malfoy's condition. Upon seeing Malfoy's fractured wrist and ankle bones, Madame Pomfrey's pupils constricted slightly. His wrist and ankle bones are broken. Although they can be healed, he will likely need at least 2 months of rest. Also, there's a high possibility of leaving some psychological trauma, and he may not be able to participate in high-intensity competitive activities in the future. In other words, the possibility of him playing Quidditch is not high. Hearing Madame Pomfrey's diagnosis, the faces of several professors also showed regret. The cheers of the older students who had experienced the passion of Quidditch also quieted down a bit. Not being able to play Quidditch is indeed a significant loss for boys during their time at Hogwarts, and everyone could empathize. Next, Madame Pomfrey walked over to Snape. Initially, upon seeing the wounds on Snape's body, Madame Pomfrey felt a slight sense of relief. Professor Snape's injuries are not serious. There is a penetrating wound from a spell, but the wound is small and did not injure any internal organs, it's merely a flesh wound. However, when she pulled back Snape's eyelids and saw his chaotic and frantic expression, Madame Pomfrey's optimistic expression instantly vanished, and her face became extremely solemn. This is troublesome. His physical injuries are not serious, but his mind seems to have a problem, and it's not a small one. Professor Snape has suffered a mental breakdown. I am not skilled in this area of treatment, so he needs to be sent to the psychiatric ward at St. Mungo's Hospital. But honestly, even there, this is considered a very serious mental problem, and complete recovery may not be possible. Even if he recovers, I'm afraid Professor Snape will find it difficult to handle demanding teaching duties afterwards. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire room gasped, and there was a commotion. Eyes filled with shock couldn't help but turn toward Charles. Everyone was curious about what magic Charles had used. Had he directly incapacitated Snape? Upon hearing this, Dumbledore couldn't help but clench his fist. He hadn't expected Charles to be able to cause such severe mental problems for Snape. Snape's inclemency was by no means ordinary. How on earth did Charles do it? This was truly troublesome. He had thought Snape was merely unconscious and could be easily treated. He was only worried that Snape would find it difficult to remain at Hogwarts and would likely have to serve him elsewhere. But now it seemed that the issue was no longer whether Snape could stay at Hogwarts, but rather that his abilities and potion-making skills might never be usable again. This most useful and capable chess piece of his had been incapacitated by Charles just like that. Just as everyone was in an uproar, Dumbledore finally spoke. His face bore an expression of seriousness and sternness that most students had never seen before. His azure eyes behind his spectacles were like blocks of blue ice, casting sharp and cold glances towards Charles. Charles Evans, you were too impulsive. You clearly called a classmate to find the professors and heads of house. You could have waited for us to handle it, and Hogwarts would have given you a fair answer. But why did you come here yourself and get into a big fight with a classmate and a professor, leading to such a serious situation now? A first-year student will henceforth bid farewell to Quidditch. I dare not imagine how much joy will be missing from his future life. He might become melancholic from now on. A potions master renowned in the academic world has developed mental problems, and it's unknown if he can be cured. Do you know how many people are waiting for Professor Snape to brew potions to solve their problems? You are truly. Dumbledore sighed deeply. You need to quickly explain what you did to Professor Snape and Draco Malfoy, what spells you used, and do your best to help with their treatment. This will reduce your guilt and punishment. As for the specific punishment, you'll have to wait for the school board's discussion. I'm afraid your classes at Hogwarts will have to be temporarily suspended. This is for your own protection. As Dumbledore finished speaking, the scene instantly became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared blankly at Dumbledore, unable to believe he would make such a decision. Headmaster Dumbledore? Why should Charles be punished? He shouldn't be punished, he stood up for his classmates. That old bat Snape went too far, and Malfoy is a tattletale, he deserved it. A chorus of voices rose, but as Dumbledore's icy blue eyes moved, his gaze sweeping over them, a heavy pressure fell upon everyone. This century's strongest wizard, despite his usual gentle demeanor, sometimes even appearing eccentric and without airs, was different now. But if he truly wanted to do something, then at Hogwarts, no one could disobey. This was Dumbledore's authority at Hogwarts. Dumbledore's tone grew heavier. As I said, Charles Evans's punishment will be decided later. As for what the punishment will be, that is something I need to discuss with the school board. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick stepped forward. Dumbledore, Charles doesn't deserve this. Dumbledore's expression softened slightly, a concession to the two heads of house, but his words remained as firm as before. Minerva, Phileas, as I said, any decision on punishment needs to be discussed with the school board. You don't need to rush to plead for Charles Evans. I will give him a just punishment. Hearing the firm resolve in Dumbledore's words, Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick both sighed inwardly, their hearts heavy. If the punishment were truly minor, Dumbledore wouldn't have said this. Moreover, Draco Malfoy's father was on the school board. How could he possibly let Charles off so easily? It was likely that Charles would face expulsion, and might even be sent to the Wizengamot for trial. Thinking of this, the two professors made up their minds. No matter what, they absolutely could not let Charles be expelled from Hogwarts. They would mobilize all their connections, and even gather student signatures at Hogwarts, to ensure Charles was protected. But now, facing a determined Dumbledore, they could only sigh inwardly, powerless against his authority. Only Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, stood firmly in front of Charles, even reaching out to hold his hand in comfort. Professor Sprout looked up at Dumbledore. Headmaster Dumbledore, I don't think my student did anything excessively wrong. If you ask me, the only wrong thing he did was involve that tattletale Draco Malfoy, but broken limbs are so easy to heal. Which Quidditch player hasn't broken a hand, leg, or rib during practice? This is probably not enough for the school board to convict Charles. As for Professor Snape, I firmly believe he got what he deserved. Besides, Charles is just an 11-year-old wizard. What profound and mysterious mental magic could he possibly possess to cause Professor Snape to have a mental breakdown? I think Professor Snape is inherently gloomy. Perhaps he couldn't accept the fact that he was defeated by a student, which is why he broke down. What does that have to do with Charles? When Professor Sprout spoke, challenging Dumbledore's authority, Charles' gaze shifted. Hufflepuff wizards were known for their resilience and were generally good-natured, rarely causing trouble. As the head of Hufflepuff and the herbology professor, Professor Sprout's personality was typically Hufflepuff, always acting low-key. But now, to protect her student, Professor Sprout was directly confronting Dumbledore's authority. The unity of Hufflepuff was evident from this. And after Professor Sprout stepped forward, all the students from Hufflepuff House also gathered around Charles. No words were spoken, but this was already a clear indication of their stance through action. Dumbledore clenched his hand, his mood growing heavier. This scene should have been arranged for Harry Potter, allowing him to solidify his identity as the savior time and again amidst the support of the crowd. But now that Charles had pulled this off, wouldn't the trials and defeat of conspiracies that Dumbledore had planned for Harry this year become mere child's play? Dumbledore's mouth twitched. He was determined that Charles Evans must be punished this time. Expulsion was out of the question, as this was a chess piece with infinite potential, capable of clearing countless obstacles for Harry Potter. But at the very least, Charles had to be suspended from classes for a few months or even half a year, making him fade from the student's sight. This way, Dumbledore could let Harry shine and gain the honor befitting the savior. During this time, it also created an opportunity for Harry Potter to interact with Charles. Saved by Harry Potter during his most difficult time, Charles would surely help Harry Potter wholeheartedly and become his most loyal friend, right? Among the crowd, Quirrell noticed this subtle change in Dumbledore's expression. In his mind, Voldemort let out a tisk, his voice filled with disgust and hatred. Here we go again. Every time that old bee's mouth twitches, it's when he's angry. It's about to be settled. Sprout and these foolish Hufflepuffs can't stand against that old bee, Dumbledore. He understands these professors and students too well, he can fool them in just a few moves. But this is good too. Charles Evans will suffer a loss at Dumbledore's hands this time. With that, I believe if I remind him again, he'll recognize Dumbledore's ugly, hypocritical face and will definitely turn to my side. To be able to defeat Snape at this age, with his help, my return will be much simpler. Just then, under everyone's astonished gaze, Charles withdrew his hand from Professor Sprout's grasp, stepped forward, and looked directly at Dumbledore. He spoke, asking a question with extreme contempt that left everyone's minds blank. Dumbledore, you say I should be punished? By what right? Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 96. Pointing the sword at Dumbledore, Charles goes wild. When Charles spoke, everyone who heard him was stunned, wondering if they had misheard. Even the portraits and ghosts in the castle, and even Dumbledore himself, were taken aback. Dumbledore stared at Charles, wondering where Charles got his courage. Did he think that after defeating Snape, he could continue to challenge him? If that were the case, he was truly too arrogant. Dumbledore's gaze grew colder. Was what I just said not clear enough, Charles? You are suspected of dangerously harming students and teachers. Although there are some reasons behind it, the harm you caused is real. Therefore, to ensure a harmonious, friendly, and fair environment at Hogwarts, you will be punished. Before he finished speaking, Charles stepped forward again. It seems the headmaster didn't understand what I meant. I'll make it clearer then. What I'm asking, by what right, refers to you, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. By what right do you have to punish me before you have reflected on yourself, admitted your mistakes, and accepted punishment? I do not believe you are qualified to make a fair judgment. When these words came out, the minds of those who heard them buzzed even more. Shocked gazes were cast towards Charles. Even Quirrell and Voldemort, who was possessing Quirrell, looked at Charles with the eyes of a madman. Is he crazy? He dares to speak to Dumbledore like that? Is he questioning Dumbledore's qualification as headmaster? Voldemort was horrified in Quirrell's mind. He had always thought that when he was a student, he was the most insane and deeply hidden dangerous person in Hogwarts history. He opened the Chamber of Slytherin, killed a female classmate in the process, and successfully framed another student, causing them to drop out. He also created horrifying Horcruxes during his time at school, committing multiple murders in the process. But all of this was nothing compared to what Charles had done today. A first-year little wizard questioning the qualification of the Hogwarts headmaster and the chief of the Wizengamot to make a fair judgment? Only a little over a decade has passed, and the wizarding world has truly gone mad. Voldemort couldn't help but exclaim, "This show today is truly interesting." At this moment, a terrifying and boundless aura suddenly erupted from Dumbledore, as if the sky was about to collapse. Charles Evans, do you know what you are saying? Charles remained completely unmoved. Dumbledore was terrifyingly strong. The power of his magic was so immense that the current Charles could only look up to it. If they were to fight head-on, Charles estimated that besides transforming into an ancient dragon to contend with Dumbledore for a short time, his only option would be to apparate away. But at Hogwarts, in front of so many people, Charles was 10 out of 10 sure that Dumbledore would never make a move. Firstly, Dumbledore wouldn't stoop to fighting a first-year student, it would be beneath his dignity. Secondly, there were so many people present. If Dumbledore were to truly attack him, unless he modified everyone's memories, his reputation would truly collapse. There was also a third point. Dumbledore was the headmaster of Hogwarts and had the greatest authority there, but taking on the position of headmaster also meant that Dumbledore was not without limitations at Hogwarts. If he dared to kill a student, Hogwarts' own defensive magic would immediately activate and strip him of his headmaster authority. A headmaster cannot intentionally harm a student. This is a rule written in Hogwarts, a history. Because of this, Charles was not intimidated by Dumbledore's aura. He sneered. Of course I know what I'm saying. If the headmaster still doesn't understand, then I'll tell you one thing at a time. So, first of all, Charles waved his wand, and behind him, in the Slytherin head of house office, Snape's arm was lifted. Beneath the already slit sleeve, the incredibly conspicuous dark mark, a skull intertwined with a snake, was revealed. Dumbledore's heart sank, and the next moment, Charles asked faintly, "Severus Snape, head of Slytherin, Hogwarts potions professor. When I was fighting him, I found the dark mark on his arm. According to the records I've read in books, this is the mark branded on the core followers of the Black Magic Lord, symbolizing the highest honor among the Death Eaters." In other words, Snape was a core member of the Death Eaters before. Regarding this, Headmaster Dumbledore, do you admit it? When Charles said these words, the little wizards of Hogwarts immediately exploded. The first-year little wizards were ignorant and naive, most of them still didn't know what the Dark Mark and Death Eaters meant. But they certainly knew the name of the Black Magic Lord. Even the Muggle-born young wizards, after these past few days, had been thoroughly educated about the terror of the Black Magic Lord because of Harry Potter. This was an existence in the wizarding world whose name couldn't even be mentioned. Now, according to Charles, Snape actually had the mark of a Death Eater on him. The older students, even more so, collectively drew in a sharp breath. They were much clearer than the younger wizards about what this mark and being a core member of the Death Eaters meant. A skull and a snake, is that really the dark mark? It must be, otherwise Snape would have washed it off, but he couldn't. Once the dark mark is branded, it's impossible to wash away. He's really a Death Eater, and a core member at that. Why wasn't someone like him caught and sent to Azkaban? How is he still teaching at Hogwarts? A clamor of discussion spread uncontrollably. There were indeed rumors among the students that Snape was a Death Eater, but this was only circulated within a small range and without any evidence, so it hadn't caused any stir. After all, this was Hogwarts with Dumbledore. How could there be a Death Eater? Everyone firmly believed this. But now, the mark on Snape's hand shattered their trust. Especially those students whose families had members who died after being attacked by Death Eaters or were previously harmed. They were now filled with righteous indignation. Gryffindor's Neville Longbottom's face was flushed red, looking at that mark with uncontrollable disgust. Headmaster Dumbledore, is this true? Is that the mark of a Death Eater? Why is there a Death Eater at Hogwarts, and he even became the head of Slytherin? How can this be? My parents were driven mad by Death Eaters. Questions like these rose and fell throughout Hogwarts. A layer of gloom enveloped Dumbledore's heart. Following Snape's mental breakdown caused by Charles, another unexpected event had occurred. Snape's identity as a Death Eater was actually exposed by Charles in public. This matter was truly troublesome. You know, some things don't weigh much until they're put on the scale, but once they are, they can weigh 1,000 pounds. Before, although there were rumors about Snape's Death Eater identity, there was no concrete evidence, so out of respect for him, everyone turned a blind eye. Now, this had been directly exposed, and it was impossible for others to pretend ignorance. Dumbledore felt a headache coming on, still thinking about what kind of explanation to use to defend himself. However, at this moment, Charles didn't give Dumbledore a chance to explain and stepped forward again to question him. Headmaster Dumbledore, do you know whether Snape is a Death Eater? If you know, then you are deliberately concealing the fact that Snape was a core member of the Death Eaters, and without any relevant notification, you have placed Hogwarts under the threat of a Death Eater, and even allowed young wizards to be directly taught by a Death Eater. Then I would like to ask, what is your intention in knowing and not reporting? If you don't know that Snape is a Death Eater, then can I understand that under your leadership, there are serious loopholes in Hogwarts' assessment system for hiring personnel. Snape is the potions professor and even the head of Slytherin. Such an important position, was there no check before hiring him? Was his dark mark not found? Then I must ask even more, was it impossible to find, or was it not checked, or did Headmaster Dumbledore you simply know, but still choose to let Snape hold this position? Is it incompetence, dereliction of duty, or is there another motive? Headmaster Dumbledore, how will you explain yourself? Sharp words like knives and swords blocked Dumbledore's retreat one by one, causing fine beads of sweat to appear on Dumbledore's forehead, which was rare for him. He forced himself to defend. Past identities cannot be a burden on the present. What's past is past. Snape is still responsible as the potions professor and head of Slytherin, I can assure you of that. However, these words caused Charles to let out a sneer. Past events cannot affect the present? Headmaster Dumbledore, what kind of stance allows you to say such words? Past events have indeed solidly affected the present, and this influence is still ongoing. The crimes committed by those Death Eaters in the past have caused countless people here to lose their fathers or mothers, and some students even lost their parents because of the Black Magic Lord and the Death Eaters, becoming orphans. The crimes they committed in the past still leave the wizarding world with lingering fears. Countless people dare not recall that period, and the damage caused to the wizarding world has not been healed to this day. Yet you say that past events cannot be a burden on the present, that what's past is past. Charles looked at some of the students present whose eyes were red and fists were clenched tightly. I would like to ask the headmaster to look at them, look at Neville Longbottom, whose parents were cruelly tortured to madness by Death Eaters using the Cruciatus curse, look at Harry Potter, the boy who lived, but the price of living was that his parents sacrificed themselves that day to resist the Black Magic Lord and the Death Eaters. Look at how many people here still harbor hatred and pain. Have the past events truly passed? Have the past crimes truly been forgiven? Headmaster, no matter how respected you are, what right do you have to forgive on their behalf? Charles asked Neville, Harry Potter, and the others. Do you forgive? Neville's eyes were bloodshot, Harry Potter's lightning-shaped scar on his forehead was throbbing as if it would explode, and many students who had lost loved ones because of the Death Eaters were gritting their teeth and growling, Don't forgive. How could we possibly forgive these beasts? Dumbledore fell silent, completely thrown off balance. But Charles didn't give him any time to collect his thoughts. Alright, regarding whether Snape's identity as a Death Eater makes him fit to teach and educate at Hogwarts, I believe we already have an answer. Now, let's move on to what you just said, Headmaster, about Snape doing quite well at Hogwarts. Charles revealed a mocking smile. I truly didn't expect that seeing so many people applauding Snape being knocked to the ground, you, Headmaster, could actually say that Snape has done well. So, that means you were completely unaware of Snape's actions, is that right, Headmaster? For so many years, Snape has used countless malicious words to insult, suppress, and ridicule young wizards. As long as they weren't Slytherin, no matter how excellent their potions were, it was difficult to get his approval. In fact, if he was in a bad mood or didn't like you, even if you made a perfect potion, you wouldn't get the points you deserved. And for students outside of Slytherin, losing points for no reason was simply commonplace, accompanied by insults to their intelligence and character. No recognition or praise, only suppression. Is this the behavior a professor should have? I would also like to ask the headmaster, besides the members of Slytherin House, how resilient must a young wizard be to maintain their enjoyment of potions under such blows? Then I can only say that he has done a truly excellent job of monopolizing potions for Slytherin and making students from other houses lose interest in the subject. Is this what you mean, headmaster, when you say Snape has done well in his position as a professor? Dumbledore opened his mouth, unable to say a word. He was truly in the wrong. Did he not know about the things Snape had done? He truly knew, he just hadn't taken it seriously. Before Charles caused such a stir, he hadn't imagined that Snape insulting a few students would cause such an uproar. Anyway, no student had failed to graduate because of this so far, and Snape was his most capable pawn, so why upset Snape over such a small matter? Charles' sneer grew even more pronounced. Also, headmaster, you mentioned the harmonious, friendly, fair, and just atmosphere at Hogwarts. A joke, truly a huge joke. When has Hogwarts ever been harmonious and friendly? Can you honestly say that house rivalry doesn't exist? How many young wizards who didn't even know each other before have inexplicably become enemies simply because they were sorted into houses with poor relations? Have you thought of measures to resolve this? No, you seem to think this is a tradition of Hogwarts, that it doesn't need to change, that you can let it be, and even think it's harmonious and friendly. And fairness and justice, that's even more of a joke. Fair? Snape can deduct points from students arbitrarily, he can insult them at will, is that fair? Just? Slytherin has won the House Cup for 6 consecutive years. Is it because Slytherin is far superior to other houses? I believe all the senior students and professors present understand what's going on. It's nothing more than Snape being able to add points to Slytherin at will and deduct points from houses that threaten Slytherin. Then I have to ask, the efforts of students from other houses for the House Cup are meaningless, while Slytherin can win the House Cup by doing nothing. It's one thing for this to happen once or twice, but now it's 6 consecutive times. Where is the fairness and justice? If this continues, who will still want to work hard for the House Cup? Everyone knows it's already decided for Slytherin. Whatever they do is just adding a little fun for Slytherin House and Snape. I refuse to believe that no one has ever reported this problem. What measures have you taken, Headmaster Dumbledore? Charles' voice grew increasingly high-pitched. If you knew all this, then you are condoning Snape's actions, condoning insults, verbal abuse, psychological humiliation, condoning cheating, favoritism, condoning injustice, and tacitly allowing Snape to teach all the students at Hogwarts a life lesson. Effort is useless, having someone behind you is the key to success. Considering that Snape is a Death Eater yet still holds a high position at Hogwarts, I have reason to suspect there are huge hidden circumstances behind this, and reason to suspect there is a relationship of benefit transfer between you and Snape. Dumbledore's face changed dramatically, and he vehemently denied it. Nonsense. Charles chuckled. Then you don't know about these situations? Then I have to ask you even more, Headmaster Dumbledore, you haven't understood the situation of the school at all for so many years, and Snape has been doing whatever he wants. May I ask if you have been sidelined by him? The most powerful wizard of this century, Headmaster of Hogwarts, Chief Mugwump of the Wizengamot, holder of the Order of Merlin, Albus Dumbledore. What exactly have you been doing during your many years as Headmaster of Hogwarts? Have you protected the psychological health of the students? Have you ensured fairness among the houses? Under your leadership, has Hogwarts become a haven for seeking knowledge and learning, or has it become a breeding ground for school bullying, discrimination, prejudice, and injustice? As Charles spoke passionately, the entire Hogwarts was silent. Then a hat, seemingly out of nowhere, fell and landed in front of Charles. A sudden inspiration struck Charles, and he instinctively reached out, pulling a jeweled, ornate, and gleaming sword from the sorting hat. The Sword of Gryffindor, symbolizing the courage of Hogwarts students to resist authority and fight injustice. It would not only appear before Gryffindors but also before any student who displayed this precious courage. And at this moment, it revealed itself before Charles. Charles held the Sword of Gryffindor, its blade pointed directly at Dumbledore. "Just now you said you were going to punish me. Sorry, until you explain these matters clearly, I do not acknowledge or agree that you have any right to punish anyone. Because the facts prove that you are either biased or incompetent, neither of which qualifies you to judge others. Until you announce your own punishment, you have no right to judge me." Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 97. Dumbledore can't protect those I want to kill. Harvest inventory. Clang. As Charles' resonant words echoed, the Sword of Gryffindor hummed softly. Beneath the dome of Hogwarts, everyone, professors, students, even the portraits and ghosts in the corridors, and the lurking Voldemort and Dumbledore himself, fell into a deathly silence. Someone was pointing a sword at Dumbledore in Hogwarts? Either they were insane, or the world had gone mad. Especially for those who had read the school history and knew that the sword Charles had drawn from the Sorting Hat was precisely the Sword of Gryffindor, there was a sense of unreality. Before this, Dumbledore was the pride of Gryffindor House. When Dumbledore was mentioned, Gryffindor students would puff out their chests, as if they were superior. The greatest wizard of the century came from Gryffindor, how could they not be proud of this? But now, the Sword of Gryffindor was pointing at Dumbledore in the hands of a Hufflepuff, which truly felt disillusioning. Everyone present, especially those who had been at Hogwarts for some time and experienced the things Charles mentioned, suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. What Charles said, it seems to make a lot of sense. When I first came to Hogwarts, I was targeted by Snape and lost points. When I witnessed Snape and the Slytherins' various reckless actions, I also felt confused. Later, I just got used to it, but now that I think about it, the more I think, the more wrong it feels. Where was Dumbledore when these things happened? Why didn't he do anything? When I enrolled in first year, Dumbledore even said that if we had any opinions or suggestions about Hogwarts, we could tell him. At that time, I naively wrote letters about these things, but the replies I got had no real substance. Thinking about it now, Headmaster Dumbledore doesn't seem to be like he says. He saw these things, but he didn't want to deal with them. Such thoughts had occasionally flickered in their minds before. After all, Hogwarts had too many problems. Besides the magic's wonder, attending this school that claimed to stand for love, peace, unity, and justice still couldn't escape campus bullying, discrimination, and so on. In the original story, you could see from Luna Lovegood's experiences that her shoes, schoolbag, and other things were often hidden by her roommates. Harry Potter once saw Luna wearing one shoe, damp and alone. This kind of thing didn't just happen once. Did the school provide any solutions? Ravenclaw was already a relatively gentle house, yet it still couldn't avoid campus bullying. One could imagine what would happen in places with stronger personalities like Gryffindor and Slytherin. Students within these houses naturally experienced this and harbored resentment. It was just that before, Dumbledore's halo had obscured too much, making them subconsciously unwilling to question him. Now that Charles had pierced through this layer of halo, more and more questions began to surge in their hearts. Among the crowd, Voldemort, possessing Quirrell, heard the whispers. He couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. From the process of him gathering Death Eaters and starting his uprising, Dumbledore had always been his biggest obstacle. Voldemort had thought more than once about slandering Dumbledore from various angles. He would find various newspapers to publish articles, have his noble subordinates mock and ridicule Dumbledore at various gatherings, and fabricate negative stories, attempting to tarnish Dumbledore's reputation. But he found that the more he tried to ruin Dumbledore's reputation, the more radiant Dumbledore's image became in people's hearts, almost like a saint, becoming the embodiment of perfection. At that time, he was so angry that he called the newspaper editors and his noble Death Eater subordinates useless, and from then on, he gave up the idea of slandering Dumbledore from this angle. This time, however, he never expected that something he couldn't achieve even at his peak would be accomplished by Charles, a first-year little wizard. And he was even pointing the Sword of Gryffindor at Dumbledore in front of everyone at Hogwarts. Instantly, Voldemort seemed to have an epiphany. So lies don't hurt people, truth is the sharpest knife. How strange. I clearly remember I was good at this sort of thing. Back in Hogwarts, I was also a master at stirring up trouble and manipulating people. How did I forget all of that later? I feel like my intelligence has dropped. As everyone was moved by Charles' words, Dumbledore's expression turned grim. He never dreamed that he would have a day when he was reprimanded in Hogwarts, and even pointed at with the Sword of Gryffindor. The Sword of Gryffindor, this was a scene he had arranged for Harry Potter, exclusive to the Savior. How could you, Charles Evans, pull it out? Wouldn't that reduce the Savior's halo even more? As for Charles' reprimand and questioning of him, Dumbledore's heart didn't stir in the slightest. Instead, he felt that Charles' perspective was too narrow and he didn't know what was good for him. Everything he did was a plan for the wizarding world. Everything was for the sake of eliminating Voldemort and bringing true peace to the wizarding world. Charles, this ignorant child, he didn't know any of this. How dare he judge his actions with such a narrow perspective? Snape was a necessary piece in the great cause of eliminating Voldemort and must be protected. Therefore, after a long silence, Dumbledore finally spoke. Charles Evans, there are many things you simply don't understand. You are only looking at things from a superficial perspective. You don't understand some of the things Professor Snape has done, you don't understand his unknown contributions, and you don't understand how much he has sacrificed for the wizarding world, and how significant and important his role is. I guarantee with my reputation and character that Snape may have acted improperly at times, but he is a good person, and he has long since sincerely repented and made amends for the past. Dumbledore's gaze swept across the surrounding professors and the whispering students. Have you stopped believing even my words? I have fought against Voldemort for so long. Do you think I am someone who would condone a Death Eater, someone who would bring danger to Hogwarts? These words caused a struggle in everyone's hearts. It must be said that even in the face of ironclad facts, Dumbledore's image and guarantee were still very convincing. His prestige was too high, especially at Hogwarts, and it was not something Charles could shake with a single question. When Dumbledore guaranteed with his reputation and character, even though Charles had laid the groundwork for a long time, a large number of Hogwarts students still had a thought. Could Snape really have a hidden reason? Could he really be a good person? Seeing the wavering in the crowd, Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Snape was saved today. After he recovered, he could continue to serve as the head of Slytherin and Potions Professor at Hogwarts, and continue to serve him. It was just that in the future, he would have to make Snape act more carefully and cautiously. But at this moment, Charles' expression didn't change at all, as if he had already anticipated all of this. As long as Dumbledore wanted to protect Snape, mere school bullying, personality insults, those were not a big deal. After all, he was someone who once took "for the greater good" as his creed. How could the influence of his teenage years disappear so easily? Sometimes it seemed to disappear, but it was only because it was hidden deeper. For the greater good of eliminating Voldemort, what were the mental health of students, the small fairness and justice in the school? They all had to be put aside. However, since Charles had started something, he was going to see it through. Snape, no one would be able to save him, not even Dumbledore. Calculating the time, my final arrangement on Snape should be almost complete, right? Time rewound to before Dumbledore and the others arrived. Charles' mithril wand tapped Snape's temple, where he lay sprawled on the ground like a pile of mud, mentally broken and deranged. Then, it's time for the last thing. Legilimency. For the broken Snape, the Mirror of Reincarnation spell could no longer be used, but the normal version of legilimency was still possible. After 4 deductions, Charles' legilimency had also reached an extraordinary level. In the original work, Professor Slughorn had fabricated memories, and Lockhart could make others permanently forget certain memories through the memory charm. With Charles' current legilimency skills, making some modifications to Snape's memories, or even implanting some subconscious suggestions, was not difficult at all. After all, Snape's occlumency had completely collapsed during the previous series of actions, and his mind was basically at the mercy of others. As the wand waved, Charles' voice echoed in Snape's chaotic and deranged mental world. Everything was caused by Charles Evans. Snape, do you understand? When you see Charles Evans again, what should you do? Torment him with all your malice, make him scream, make him wail. Torment, Snape, torment. And now, under Madame Pomfrey's emergency treatment, Snape's unconsciousness caused by his mental breakdown had improved. He also opened his eyes with difficulty, waking up from his coma. And the first thing he saw upon waking was Charles, surrounded by the crowd like a star. The moment he saw Charles, the voices of torment in his mind filled his head. He lost Lily, Lily died, he suffered greatly, all this pain was Charles' fault. Everything was caused by Charles Evans. Torment him with all your hatred. Snape's deranged eyes were instantly covered with hatred and ferocity. He grabbed his wand that had fallen to the side, and in Madame Pomfrey's horrified scream, pointed it at Charles. Cruciatus curse. The unforgivable curse whistled out, hitting Charles' body squarely, penetrating his dragon armor spell protection. Instantly, Charles floated in midair like a puppet, and the agonizing pain surged like a tide. In his mind, the deep blue prompt sounded. Host has obtained high-level dark magic material. The points required for future deductions of dark magic will be greatly reduced. Host has obtained high-level Cruciatus Curse material. The points required for deducting the Cruciatus Curse will be greatly reduced. Charles looked at the dome of Hogwarts, a strange smile playing on his lips. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the Ministry of Magic's Aurors hurrying down the corridors of Hogwarts. They had been drawn by the photo he had released earlier, which definitively proved Snape had the dark mark. Fudge, as expected, hadn't missed this opportunity. And now, they had arrived just in time to catch Snape using the Cruciatus Curse. Even Dumbledore couldn't protect Snape in this situation. Snape was bound for Azkaban, and Charles guaranteed that if Snape lived for even 1 second longer once he was there, he would melt down all the Dementors in Azkaban and remake them. Getting rid of a Hogwarts head of house, one of Dumbledore's pawns, this took a lot of effort. But he did give me a wave of material before he died, so I guess he was truly squeezed dry of all value. It's just that Cruciatus Curse, it really hurt like hell. Fortunately, my mental strength is high enough, and my mastery of occlumency is even better. Besides suffering a bit, there won't be any lingering effects. This thought flashed through Charles' mind. Then he used his occlumency to block out the pain as much as possible and fell into a coma. With a thud, Charles' body, which had been floating in midair and twisting like a puppet, fell to the ground. Everything that happened in that split second caused everyone to scream in fear or shock. Professor Sprout's eyes were bloodshot. She kept pulling out various potions to soothe the mind and pain from her robes and poured them into Charles' mouth, while staring intently at Dumbledore. Dumbledore, this is the person you guaranteed with your reputation and character. Severus Snape, he used an unforgivable curse on a first-year wizard. Professor Flitwick also stared at Dumbledore. Headmaster Albus, Snape must be punished. Even Professor McGonagall, a member of the Order of the Phoenix, made her choice firmly, gritting her teeth as she looked at Snape. This scumbag, he must be sent to Azkaban to repent for everything he has done. In the corridor, Fudge stood with his staff and the Aurors, followed by officials from the Ministry of Magic and reporters from the Daily Prophet. Click, click, amidst the flashes of light, Fudge walked into the crowd, knelt down, and sorrowfully touched Charles' forehead with his own. Poor child, I didn't expect this, I really didn't. I thought you would dispel those shadows at Hogwarts, but I didn't expect something like this to happen again at Hogwarts. Then, Fudge looked up, his eyes red, and turned to Dumbledore. Dumbledore, you must explain clearly about Snape having the dark mark and him publicly casting an unforgivable curse to torture a student. Now, we are taking Snape to Azkaban. He must remain there until the Wizengamot formally passes judgment on him. Then, without waiting for Dumbledore's nod, Fudge waved his hand, and the Aurors, supporting the raving Snape, hurried away from Hogwarts. Throughout the entire process, Dumbledore did not speak. He had nothing to say. Snape's use of the Cruciatus Curse had truly put Dumbledore at a disadvantage, leaving him with no room for public refute. As for Fudge and the Ministry officials, he couldn't use his prestige and reputation to say anything more. These unscrupulous politicians wouldn't fall for that, they would only be like flies smelling blood, trying every possible way to suck more. In this round, on Hogwarts' home ground, Dumbledore was utterly defeated. When Fudge turned to leave, even though he was trying his best to suppress it, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curve upwards. At this moment, he had only one thought in his mind. This feels so good, incredibly good. Charles Evans, you are truly my lucky star. You did a brilliant job, delivering such a huge scoop about Dumbledore right into my hands. Fudge felt that every single galleon he reimbursed Charles was incredibly worthwhile. Charles took the money, and he really delivered. Increase the reimbursement, I must increase his reimbursement limit again. Meanwhile, Dumbledore turned and walked towards the headmaster's office, a cold glint in his eyes. Fudge, a foolish politician, willing to do anything for power and gain. Charles Evans, a young wizard who acts recklessly with a little talent, completely unaware of the bigger picture. Even if Snape used an unforgivable curse, for the cause of defeating Voldemort, he must be protected. I am the representative in the Wizengamot court, and I still have great influence to wield there. No one can stop what I intend to do, the plans I intend to lay out. Charles was sent to a private room in the school infirmary for recuperation. Madame Pomfrey breathed a sigh of relief after examining Charles' condition. Perhaps due to Snape's state, the Cruciatus Curse Charles received doesn't seem to have been too powerful, so there shouldn't be any lingering effects. But this child needs rest. Then, she cast a healing spell on Charles and asked everyone to leave. She herself gently closed the door of the infirmary. And after everyone had left, Charles slowly opened his eyes. In his eyes, it seemed as if the windswept, cloud-covered sea around Azkaban was reflected. Perhaps Dumbledore is still trying to find a way to save Snape through his influence in the Wizengamot. However, it's all over now. Hogwarts, the Wizengamot, the Order of Merlin, perhaps these are Dumbledore's home ground. But Azkaban, that place belongs to me. The wind held, dark clouds gathered, and the entire island was black, filled with a suffocating atmosphere. The Ministry of Magic Aurors escorted Snape, taking a small boat to the coast of Azkaban. Dementors were already waiting here, and as the boat docked, they took custody of Snape from the Aurors. The Aurors breathed a sigh of relief, gave a few more instructions, and then hastily left this terrifying prison of the wizarding world. The Dementors watched silently as the Aurors departed. When the Aurors' small boat became a black dot and disappeared on the horizon, completely out of sight, several Dementors pulled down their hoods. Snape looked at this scene in confusion. Although he had a mental breakdown and was somewhat deranged, the foundation of years of practicing occlumency was still there, and he hadn't lost his most basic judgment. He was imprisoned in Azkaban, shouldn't he be taken to a cell? Why did the Dementors suddenly pull down their hoods? A feeling of extreme danger rose in his heart, but without his wand, he couldn't summon his patroness. Several Dementors surrounded Snape. The last words Snape could hear were, "Lord Charles Evans, ruler of the Dementors, King of Azkaban, has asked us to bid you farewell." The next moment, several Dementors sucked Snape's soul dry, leaving behind only a walking corpse of a body. Then, they even tied heavy stones to Snape's body and violently threw him into the dark, deep, bottomless sea outside the Azkaban coast. Rustle, rustle. Dumbledore clutched his quill, writing letter after letter. As the chief mugwump of the Wizengamot, he also had immense influence and connections in the Wizengamot court. Snape's crime of using an unforgivable curse in public would mean a life sentence in Azkaban for an ordinary wizard, but among Dumbledore's connections, there were naturally no shortage of magical lawyers who could defend Snape. Behavioral abnormalities caused by a mental breakdown, this was a point that could be defended. Just like the excuse of being controlled by the imperious curse used by those Death Eaters who escaped punishment in the past, if such fabricated excuses could succeed, let alone Snape who was indeed having a mental breakdown. Besides, Dumbledore could also influence the judges in the court. In this way, Snape would at least not have to stay in Azkaban until he died. He could come out for recuperation, and then continue to shine for Dumbledore. After receiving a positive reply, Dumbledore felt reassured and finally let out a long breath. Immediately, he drafted a notice to the Ministry of Magic. The Wizengamot court will hold a private trial for Severus Snape tomorrow, requesting the extraction of Severus Snape for the hearing. Shortly after this notice was sent out, a reply came from the Ministry of Magic. "It is with regret that we inform you, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Chief Mugwump of the Wizengamot court. According to feedback from the Azkaban Dementors, Severus Snape attempted to escape and violently resisted arrest after arriving at Azkaban, posing a serious threat to the Dementors' lives. His soul was absorbed by the Dementors during a fierce struggle. As for his body, due to the strong winds and waves that day, it was swept into the seabed by the waves. As you know, the waters near Azkaban are deep, dark, and bottomless, and even the Dementors dare not go down to retrieve it. It is likely that no one can find it now. Regarding the trial of Severus Snape tomorrow, would you like to proceed according to the regulations for the absence of the party concerned?" Without finishing the letter, Dumbledore's expression was as cold as ice. The next moment, this usually gentle and kind old man couldn't help but pull out the Elder Wand. Golden flames erupted from the tip of the wand, burning the letter from the Ministry of Magic to ashes. In Dumbledore's opinion, this was definitely Fudge's doing. Dumbledore, who had never thought highly of Fudge, was truly furious at this moment. "Cornelius Fudge, you pathetic creature. This time you've truly angered me." Meanwhile, in the hospital wing, Charles' lips curved into a smile. "The person I want to kill, no one can save them. Including you, Dumbledore." However, achieving this step this time, and causing such a big commotion, was something Charles had not anticipated, but he never regretted it. Anyway, Snape's threat was completely eliminated, and everything Charles needed from Snape was now in his hands. The remaining trouble was nothing more than attracting Dumbledore's attention. However, as long as Dumbledore was the headmaster of Hogwarts, he couldn't pose a real threat to Charles, and Charles wasn't afraid at all. If worst came to worst, he could just apparate away. Besides, a letter from the Ministry of Magic had already been delivered to Hogwarts and placed on Charles' bedside table. It contained the Ministry of Magic's condolences to Charles, telling him to eat and drink without worry and not to have any concerns about reimbursement, prioritizing his physical and mental recovery above all else. Fudge even generously stated that Charles' procurement needs could now go directly through the Ministry of Magic's channels. Some strange and unusual items could be purchased on his behalf through the Ministry of Magic's channels. Some things were heavily restricted for individual purchase, but if the Ministry of Magic bought them, it would be much easier and simpler. For example, a new batch of dragon materials, expedited by the Ministry of Magic, would soon be delivered to Charles from Romania. Charles' smile widened. This way, he could make up for some of the many deduction points he had spent, and his growth rate would be faster. Once his plans were implemented one by one and he developed for another year or two, what could Dumbledore do, even with the Elder Wand in hand and being at Hogwarts? If he dared to target Charles again, Charles would snap the Elder Wand for him. This was the confidence of a cheat. Then, a fervent look appeared in Charles' eyes. I haven't had time before, so now. It's time to take stock of the gains. Deep Blue. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 98. 4 Deductions of Occlumency. Deep Blue source? Magic necklace. As Charles called out, the messages that he hadn't had time to examine closely during the intense confrontation reappeared in Deep Blue. Dark magic, Sectum Sempra, Levi Corpus, Cruciatus Curse, and all the dark magic materials Charles had learned from Snape during the countless cycles after casting the Mirror of Reincarnation spell on him were truly dazzling. After all, Snape was a potions master and the head of Slytherin. The magic he acquired through potion exchanges or from related Slytherin noble families was truly extensive. These materials alone would save Charles countless points in his dark magic deductions. In addition, Snape's knowledge of potions was also fully acquired by Charles and turned into materials for Deep Blue. With this accumulation, Charles could easily complete 4 or even 5 deductions in potions, and his mastery of potions could quickly rival or even surpass Snape's in a short period. This way, Charles could brew most potions himself, maximizing the magical power of various magical ingredients, instead of the rather wasteful method of directly consuming them raw. As for the ancestral reversion potion that would increase the bloodline concentration of Fluffy the three-headed dog, it would be much easier for Charles to research. At the same time, Charles' gains in mental strength and mental magic were also extremely rich. The mental confrontation with Snape not only provided Charles with a lot of advanced materials on occlumency and legilimency, greatly reducing the points required for deductions in the field of mental magic. Even his mental strength increased significantly during the confrontation. According to the theory Professor Phileas Flitwick told Charles, the power of spells is largely linked to mental strength. Therefore, the increase in mental strength conservatively estimated increased Charles' spell power by more than 30%. And this was without Charles continuing to deduce occlumency. Currently, Charles' occlumency had only undergone a second deduction on the Hogwarts Express. If he were to perform a third or even fourth deduction, it would likely bring a huge increase to his mental strength, and even produce more characteristics similar to faster thinking and enhanced memory. After reviewing all the gains in his mind, Charles couldn't suppress the excitement on his face. I made a fortune. The richness of this harvest even made Charles a little worried. It seemed like the deduction points were not enough again. Which aspect should he prioritize for improvement? After a moment of hesitation, Charles made a decision. Magical power and mental strength are the two factors that determine the power of magic. Charles had already experienced the former. He could improve it through the feedback from the Axiomagic. And this required the blood of sufficiently powerful and ancient magical creatures, such as the three-headed dog he was seeking, which would require the ancestral reversion potion to achieve. Potions, and separately deducing potion formulas, while also collecting ingredients and brewing potions, added up to too many tasks that couldn't be completed overnight. But mental strength could be improved by deducing occlumency. So Charles' primary choice was to continue deducing occlumency. Deep Blue, third and fourth deductions for occlumency. As Charles whispered in his mind, Deep Blue deducted nearly 200,000 points. Along with it came more knowledge about occlumency. The first deduction of occlumency allowed Charles to reach a state of mind where his brain was closed off from distracting thoughts, like meditation. In this state, the negative effects brought by his adult soul and mind were eliminated, and his magic exerted greater power. In the second deduction, occlumency evolved into a memory palace, materializing the process of knowledge being mind and knowledge-enhancing mind, giving Charles a cultivation method that could continuously increase his mental strength. At this moment, the third deduction further evolved upon the memory palace. During the third deduction, Charles felt his control over his mental world becoming stronger and stronger. He walked step by step in his mental world, walking in the deep memory palace, feeling as if he were walking in reality. With a wave of his hand, the mithril wand was in his grasp. Immediately after, Charles cast a spell, identical to the spells he cast in reality. As his thoughts turned, everyone he had fought or witnessed appeared before his eyes. With a single thought, he could recreate the scene of that day's raid on Nocturne Alley. His past self and those dark wizards from Nocturne Alley appeared in his mental world, repeating the actions of that day. Charles looked at the techniques he used at that time, and from his current perspective, there were still many rough spots. Whether it was the control of the combat rhythm or the precision, speed, and power of the transfiguration, they were all much inferior to now. Then, the battle with Snape appeared before his eyes. He could even analyze this battle from both his perspective and Snape's perspective simultaneously, as if it had become some kind of virtual game, and Charles was the administrator with the highest authority. At this moment, Deep Blue's prompt also sounded in Charles' ears. Occlumency third deduction completed. Host has gained mental simulation ability. The host can simulate things in magic that you have already come into contact with or have some understanding of in the mental world. This ability can be used to simulate various aspects such as combat, spell research and development, and potion brewing. The clearer the host's understanding of these things or magic, the better the simulation effect. At the same time, the more relevant knowledge stored in the memory palace and the higher its level, the closer the simulation will be to reality. If it's knowledge already stored in the memory palace, it can be simulated with 100% accuracy. Charles' eyes showed surprise. If this ability is used well, it can definitely play a huge role. For example, when facing a strong enemy, one can use the previously obtained information to simulate the battle beforehand, gaining a clear understanding of the enemy's habits, and then fight them in reality. This way, one can definitely seize the initiative. Also, if one only has one copy of a precious material but needs to concoct a crucial potion, they can first use the simulation ability to increase the success rate to the highest. Even in spell research and development, this ability can greatly increase efficiency. After the surprise, a strange, indescribable feeling surfaced in Charles' heart. The third deduction of occlumency, did it feel somewhat familiar? Soon, this feeling became even stronger after the fourth deduction of occlumency. Because Deep Blue actually prompted that the result of the fourth deduction of occlumency was knowledge deduction. Based on the memory palace and mental simulation, the host can use the knowledge deduction function to perform subsequent deductions of existing knowledge in the mental world. This will consume the host's mental power. The more complex the knowledge, the higher the level, and the more missing the materials, the more mental power will be consumed. If materials helpful in the deduction process are collected, the mental power required for deduction will decrease. Seeing this, Charles' pupils slightly contracted. He finally understood the source of this feeling of déjà vu. Simulation, deduction. Isn't this similar to Deep Blue's function? Occlumency after the third and fourth deductions is close to a severely weakened version of Deep Blue. Or is there a possibility that my infinite deduction system, Deep Blue, could be occlumency after infinite deductions? Such a thought arose in Charles' mind. He couldn't help but ask Deep Blue, "Deep Blue, do you have any connection with occlumency? How were you created?" A mechanical voice immediately replied, "Please obtain more materials about the history of the magical world and the essence of magic, and the system will have the authority to answer corresponding questions." This reply made the strange look in Charles' eyes deepen. It wasn't an admission, nor a denial, but asking him to obtain more materials about the history of the magical world and the essence of magic. As for the history of the magical world, he had already stored the entire book of A History of Magic in his memory palace. Why would Deep Blue still ask him to obtain materials about the history of the magical world? That is to say, the history recorded in A History of Magic is not comprehensive, and even has huge omissions, not touching upon the true history of the magical world, which is why Deep Blue gave such a prompt. So, which period of history did A History of Magic not even touch upon? In Charles' mind, various snippets about the so-called ancient and primordial times that he had encountered so far subconsciously surfaced. When he first came into contact with the magical world, Darkseid was almost frantically singing praises of the so-called ancient ones and great old ones, seeking their traces. He also vowed to Charles that the era of the ancient ones would definitely return. In the Dream of R'lyeh, Charles did indeed see that magnificent and bizarre giant city and the low murmurs emanating from the temple in the center of the city. Then, at Gringotts, when he came into contact with apparition, the goblins also proudly claimed that the ancient-smelling spatial passage they used for apparition was a gift from ancient gods in the primordial era. Following that, the existence in the Sea of Dragon Blood in Romania also mentioned words like ancient and era. Charles took a deep breath. If only one aspect says this, it might be a coincidence. But now, all the threads I've come into contact with indicate that there might have been an ancient, buried history in the magical world a long time ago. From Deep Blue mentioning that I still need to obtain more materials about the essence of magic, it seems that period of history is also related to the source of wizards' magic power and the essence of spellcasting. The question that Professor Phileas Flitwick mentioned countless spell scholars are seeking to solve, where does the magic power of spells ultimately originate, might also be related to this. The waters of the magical world are very deep, and there are even some secrets behind the Deep Blue system itself. After a moment of contemplation, Charles, who still had no clue, shook his head. Forget it, without clues and materials, thinking is useless. Since I haven't reached the level to access this kind of information yet, I should focus on improving my strength first. Putting everything else aside, if I could directly pull that existence in the Romanian sea of dragon blood out of its coffin, I should be able to get a lot of information. Or if I could freely enter and exit the dream of R'lyeh, perhaps I could get the most direct historical truth from it. Thinking of the dream of R'lyeh, Charles' heart stirred slightly. He had been thinking before that perhaps he couldn't freely enter and exit the dream of R'lyeh because he wasn't crazy enough, not as crazy as Dark. If I could become that deranged, perhaps I could enter on my own. And this kind of change involving the spiritual level is related to occlumency. Now that my occlumency has been deduced 4 times, I can simulate spells in my spiritual world. So, can I simulate Dark's deranged mental state? Then, Charles began to try. In his spiritual world, the figure of Dark appeared, his tentacles writhing and emitting a chilling, ominous aura. It's done, I've done it. Dark's frantic shouts echoed in the deep memory palace. Then, Charles switched to Dark's perspective, trying to experience Dark's kind of madness. But soon, after several attempts, Charles chose to give up. The madness he could experience seemed to be superficial, lacking something. It was like an actor trying to portray a mental illness compared to a real mental illness. It wasn't crazy enough. Charles guessed that, on the one hand, it might be that his occlumency level was not high enough to simulate that kind of madness. On the other hand, it might be that he had never experienced that kind of madness from a first-person perspective, only seeing it from a bystander's point of view. Naturally, he didn't understand the essence of that madness well enough. The former is relatively easy to solve, just gather some points and continue to deduce occlumency, or continue to fill the memory palace with knowledge to increase spiritual strength, which should also enhance the effect of spiritual simulation. But the latter is troublesome. Dark has shrunk back into the dream R'lyeh and won't come out. He's probably not going to give me another chance to pull me in. Where can I go to experience Dark's kind of madness from a first-person perspective? Charles frowned, then relaxed. Forget it, take it one step at a time. Improving strength is the most important thing right now. If my strength improves, won't I be afraid of not finding the corresponding information? After 4 deductions of occlumency, Charles' spiritual strength had significantly improved compared to before, and the power of his spells continued to increase. Furthermore, the newly acquired abilities of spiritual simulation and knowledge deduction were also of great help in improving his overall strength. Although the current strength of these abilities is not enough to help Charles continue to deduce spells like Son of No Light, Sacred Land, and Only I Am the Honored God, let alone magical Oxio and dragon language magic in ancient dragon form. But for the vast majority of ordinary spells, these 2 abilities are completely sufficient. When Charles has nothing to do, he can practice and deduce those ordinary spells in his spiritual world. With his current spiritual strength, an ordinary spell can unleash considerable power and can be used as a supplementary method. And if he can gain some insights during the self-deduction process, he can save a lot of deduction points when he decides to use Deep Blue for higher-level deductions in the future. Also, this spell knowledge can be filled into the memory palace, helping Charles continue to improve his spiritual strength. Although this process is not as immediate as deducing through Deep Blue, it will accumulate to a considerable extent. Charles closed his eyes, immersing himself in the simulation and deduction of the spiritual world. At this time, outside the turbulent Hogwarts, in a village in the North Scottish wilderness. In the village's only pub, the hall was small and the lights were dim. In North Scotland in September, it couldn't be called severe cold, and the biting wind still held outside the window under the night sky. The wind that slipped in through the window cracks let out a mournful cry, as if there were ghosts hidden in the wind. The shadows of the trees outside were reflected under the dim light, like hideous hands reaching out to grab living beings. In the pub, several wizards in black robes sat around a table, each with a greedy look on their faces. They were the unlucky ones who were used as bait on the day Charles robbed Nocturne Alley. After being robbed by Charles, they were also beaten up by other dark wizards and owed debts to Gringotts. They were forced to come to the North Scottish wilderness to search for the legendary Fong necklace. After excavating dozens of ancient tombs, they actually found it. Now, an exquisite necklace was placed on the table in front of them. The necklace was made of unknown magical metal, and the craftsmanship was also unclear, but at first glance, it looked exquisite and beautiful, with a strange, cold, and terrifying beauty. The main body of the necklace was made of several fangs of the same material. The shape of these fangs was extremely strange. They had checked, and they were neither ordinary creatures nor any kind of magical animal. But the wizards didn't care about this, thinking it was just some kind of artistic processing. After seeing this necklace, who would care about the origin of these fangs? It was so exquisite, making people long to possess it permanently. Just looking at it made people feel a sense of satisfaction from the heart, a morbid fanaticism. Several people stared at the necklace for a long time without blinking, almost forgetting everything else. The pub owner looked at these strange people and walked 2 steps towards them uneasily, wanting to ask if they needed more drinks or some food. But just as he took a few steps, his eyes catching sight of the necklace on the table through the gaps between the wizards, the tray in the bar owner's hand clattered to the ground. The sound of the tray falling startled the leading wizard, as if waking him from a dream. But his companions, including the bar owner, seemed oblivious, their gazes fixed on the necklace, the greed and fervor in their eyes growing increasingly pathological. An ominous premonition arose in the wizard's heart. He recalled the scene when they dug up the necklace. In the ornate coffin, the owner, whose body had decayed to just bones, clutched the necklace tightly in his hand. His canine teeth protruded, and his skeletal face revealed a ferocious grin. When the necklace was dug up, a howl, like that of a wolf or a large hound, seemed to echo from the far distance in the wilderness. But at that time, they were all as if possessed. They pried open the tomb owner's hand, took the necklace, and fled in a panic, not even knowing what had happened during the process. By the time they regained their memories, they were already here. As he recalled these things, the panic in the wizard's heart was close to overflowing, and in the next moment, a hound's howl came from the wilderness outside the village. Compared to the howl they heard when they dug up the tomb, this howl was much closer. The wizard could no longer suppress the inexplicable fear in his heart and instinctively wanted to apparate away. But as he attempted to apparate, he felt incredibly close to the wolf's howl, even sensing the stench coming from behind him, and the extreme greed, madness, and hunger that he could feel without seeing it with his own eyes. If he hadn't immediately stopped apparating, he felt that in the next moment, he would have been instantly torn to shreds. Daring not to delay for a moment, the wizard, almost driven mad with fear, crashed through the bar door and fled wildly. In the instant he had attempted to apparate, he had sensed Hogwarts, which was not far from here. He would be safe if he fled to Hogwarts. Hogwarts had Dumbledore, the White Dark Lord, and so many powerful professors. No matter what it was, they could handle it. And a figure appeared in the wizard's mind, adding a few points of confidence alongside his fear. That little devil, no, the righteous protector, the bane of dark wizards, Lord Charles Evans, was also studying at Hogwarts now. Considering that he had given him unicorn horn, dragon heart, and a chromanchula venom before, even if those professors and Headmaster Dumbledore didn't act, if he begged him, perhaps he would act for him. He kept running until the next morning, not daring to stop for a moment, as if something invisible was constantly eyeing him from behind. It wasn't until the sun broke through the cold, thin mist of the North Scottish morning that he felt a hint of safety under the sunlight. No matter what it was, whether it was a curse or a dark magic creature, sunlight would always have some restraint, right? Exhausted, he still couldn't help but rest under a tree for a while. His eyelids grew heavier and heavier. A bizarre dream enveloped him. In the dream was a dark city, built somewhere unknown, seemingly standing in the void. All the buildings in the city defied human architectural principles, hardly resembling human houses, their angles twisted yet seemingly possessing an inner logic. And in the center of the city, a spiraling tower stood, from which came indistinct whispers. A fear of a great unknown presence invaded his heart, making him tremble in the dream. He didn't know how much time had passed before he suddenly opened his bloodshot eyes. It was as if he hadn't slept at all. Fear and panic had never left him. That city, that spiraling tower, those strange angles, made him dizzy, as if he was having trouble distinguishing between dream and reality, and some strange scene seemed to appear vaguely before his eyes. Just then, he felt something cold on his neck. Instinctively reaching out to touch it, the wizard's heart turned cold, and extreme fear washed over him like a tide. The magical Fang necklace was hanging around his neck. In his ears, he seemed to hear a hound's howl again. The howl was getting closer and closer to him. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 99, restricted section access. Let me go to the Forbidden Forest? How is one night enough? Severus Snape died in Azkaban. This news was somewhat suppressed, but for some wizards with connections and status, it was already semi-public knowledge. In the famous Malfoy manner, Lucius Malfoy, who was usually elegant and composed, looked at the letter in his hand detailing Snape's death and uncharacteristically vented his rage, smashing valuable antiques in the opulent hall to pieces. Snape didn't have many friends, but Lucius was definitely one of his closest. They were friends when they were still in school and later both joined the ranks of the Death Eaters. Lucius possessed an ancient and noble surname and wealth, while Snape had rare talent and potions. With Lucius's deliberate efforts to befriend him, their relationship grew closer over the years. After the war, their relationship became even tighter than when they were both Death Eaters. Snape, as a core member of the Death Eaters, received Dumbledore's protection and was even able to enter Hogwarts to teach and become the head of Slytherin. This was a huge relief for Lucius. One must know that at that time, the purge of Death Eaters was in full swing. Even the descendants of some prominent families couldn't avoid being sent to Azkaban. Even if they managed to avoid imprisonment through some means, the greedy bureaucrats at the Ministry of Magic wouldn't miss the opportunity to extort them. Several ancient noble families were directly ruined during this purge, and their lives were extremely difficult for a time, including some who were more prominent than the Malfoys at the time. Logically, the Malfoy family's life should not have been easy either. However, because of Snape's connection, although the Malfoy family still had to be investigated by the Ministry of Magic, they were much better off compared to other noble families. For a period after the war, the Malfoy family was even able to help other noble families, gradually becoming the leaders of the noble wizards after the war and the most prominent family. Thus, the relationship between Lucius and Snape further deepened. Snape became Draco Malfoy's godfather, and Lucius also provided a large amount of money and ancient books to Snape for his potions research. Now that Snape was dead, whether from a personal emotional standpoint or from the perspective of their intertwined interests, how could Lucius not be angry? Especially since Draco Malfoy was also implicated in this process. His wrist and ankle bones were broken. Although they were set, he was still lying in bed unable to get up. Lucius had visited Draco and had seen lingering fear on Draco's usually arrogant and spoiled face. Draco spoke very little, and even in the sleep induced by the potion, he would occasionally tremble out of fear. Thinking of this scene, Lucius couldn't help but slam his cane heavily on the ground. "Charles Evans, you filthy mudblood, it's all because of you." What angered him the most was that Charles had done such a thing, and as a school governor, he couldn't do anything about Charles. He strongly demanded that Dumbledore expel Charles and send Charles to the Wizengamot for trial, but Dumbledore refused his demands. It was a solid fact that Snape had used an unforgivable curse on Charles in public. Given this, whatever Charles had done to Snape before, including the charge of attacking a professor and causing him a mental breakdown, naturally did not hold up. Who would pursue a poor first-year little wizard who stood up for his classmates for the sake of a vicious Death Eater who had been sent to Azkaban? As for the matter involving Draco, trying to expel Charles, who had been hit by the Cruciatus curse, based on this, even if Dumbledore agreed, public opinion would likely be in an uproar the next second. In the school board meeting, even the vast majority of governors unanimously agreed that Dumbledore needed to properly appease Charles and represent Hogwarts in offering Charles condolences and compensation. As for Charles' punishment, it would first have to wait until his injuries were completely healed, and secondly, it must not be too severe, only serving as a warning. Despite Lucius's strong insistence, the final punishment decided for Charles was merely to have him walk through the Forbidden Forest at night accompanied by the gamekeeper. Lucius was so angry he almost laughed. Regardless of how Charles defeated Snape, whether it was some rare magic or Snape's carelessness and underestimation of his opponent, this little wizard's strength was definitely not ordinary. An ordinary little wizard going into the Forbidden Forest at night might have nightmares. But for Charles, what was the difference between this and going out for a stroll? Could this even be called a punishment? Taking a deep breath, after a long hesitation, Lucius gritted his teeth. He was never a decisive person, but this time, Snape's death and Draco's injuries had truly provoked him. If he didn't do something about this, if he didn't make that mudblood Charles pay the price, the Malfoy family's reputation would likely be in jeopardy. Lucius immediately thought of Nocturne Alley. The dark wizards there were vicious and would do anything for galleons. As a Hogwarts governor, he couldn't let people into Hogwarts Castle, but if it was deep in the Forbidden Forest where Hogwarts' protective magic was relatively weak, letting some dark wizards in for a short time was still possible. In this way, with a planned attack against an unsuspecting target, coupled with the endless array of bizarre methods used by dark wizards, unlike Snape who as a Hogwarts professor couldn't use many dark spells in the castle, Lucius felt it would be very simple for a group of Nocturne Alley dark wizards to take down Charles. Deep down, Lucius still felt that with Snape's strength, how could he possibly lose to a little wizard in a normal fight? He must have underestimated his opponent and held back as a professor. But this time, these dark wizards would not have any sympathy or pity. By then, Lucius swore, he would make those dark wizards give Charles a good welcome, letting him know what it meant to be vicious. Then, a sinister smile appeared on Lucius's lips, and he sent a message to a wizard he knew in Nocturne Alley. In a while, bring some people to help me teach someone a lesson. Don't worry, it's not a tough opponent, just an academic type, easy to deal with your methods. Pull this off, and you can name your price for galleons. As for where exactly this would be carried out, Lucius didn't specify, only saying he would take them there himself. After all, this involved passing through a weak point in the protective magic to enter the depths of the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts. If word got out, the trouble would be considerable. Inside Nocturne Alley, a dark wizard looked at the message that had been delivered, his eyes practically glowing. Brothers, a job from Lucius Malfoy, a big client. The chance to get rich is here. Merlin's beard, after being punished by that little demon, no, by that embodiment of justice last time, we were truly penniless. Today, our luck has finally turned, and a big job has arrived. As for the difficulty of this job, seeing that Lucius Malfoy said it wasn't a tough opponent, but an academic, he must be a bookworm who just follows instructions. They had helped Lucius with dirty work several times before, such as when the Malfoy family's business encountered rivals. Lucius would ask them to help teach the opponents a lesson. Each time the job was easy, but the reward was quite generous. This time, the dark wizards of Nocturne Alley naturally understood it to be this type of job. More than a dozen dark wizards agreed immediately. Not only did they agree, but to reassure Lucius and keep this big client happy, the dark wizards who had worked with Lucius before looked at the others and said, "Although that little demon stole a lot of things last time, don't I know your habits? No one would put all their eggs in one basket. You should all have some hidden treasures left. This time is our first battle to regroup, and we must make it a good one. So don't hold back, and to be safe, bring all your magical items." Meanwhile, upon receiving the replies from these dark wizards, Lucius's expression relaxed. It seems there shouldn't be any problems. However, Lucius then thought about it and decided it would be safer to be even more prepared. There could be no accidents with this matter. Otherwise, if Charles escaped and told everyone about it, without Snape's connection, he would probably have to take a trip to Azkaban. Therefore, Lucius went to the cabinet where the Malfoy family's treasures were stored. Besides a secret Voldemort's diary placed there, everything else in the cabinet was the most precious, powerful, and dangerous magical items collected by the Malfoy family. Lucius picked out a few of the most powerful items from inside, but still felt it wasn't enough. Even a lion uses its full strength to catch a rabbit. I need to be even more secure. Immediately, Lucius contacted several noble families who had close ties with the Malfoy family. Although the current magical nobles respected the Malfoy family the most, many others had declined, and 2 families had even fallen to the point of becoming the foundation of the Malfoy family. Lucius knew that the good things passed down from their ancestors might not be less than his own family's. Since they were going to act in the Forbidden Forest, the safer, the better. Besides, Lucius choosing to act personally was also somewhat about avenging Draco, letting him see how brave his father was and personally breaking the shadow for him. This, of course, had to be a beautiful victory. So Lucius visited the noble families who were close to him one by one. "Crabbe, I heard your family has an old magical item left from a few hundred years ago, and it's very powerful. Goyle, tell me, how have I treated you normally? Have I taken good care of you? Now I need a small favor, lend me something, and I'll return it to you after a while. Are you willing to help me with this favor?" In this way, Lucius visited 4 or 5 families, borrowing 1 or 2 magical items from each. From defense to attack, he had everything, essentially arming himself to the teeth. Let alone dealing with a first-year Hogwarts student, even if he were to face Dumbledore. No, even if he were to face Voldemort. Forget it, even if he were to face that crazy woman Bellatrix Lestrange, or Dolohov, one of the best Death Eaters, he wouldn't be afraid at all. This was the power of galleons. Lucius's eyes showed a look of full confidence. It's settled. Just waiting for that mudblood to recover from his injuries and go to the Forbidden Forest, and I'll take the dark wizards to let him know what regret is. Meanwhile, Charles had been in the hospital wing for almost a full day. Throughout this day, he had been almost constantly using the newly acquired mental simulation and knowledge deduction abilities to learn new spells. It must be said that although the effect was far less than directly deducing with Deep Blue, the efficiency was much higher than learning in reality. with visible progress every moment. A simple spell like the levitation charm could already reach the level Professor Flitwick had achieved when creating the dueling platform in Charles' hands. Calculated this way, practicing for a full day using this method could probably save nearly 1,000 deduction points. It didn't seem like much, but accumulated over time, it could save hundreds of thousands of points a year. And this was just the beginning. As Charles' mental strength increased, especially as more and more knowledge was stored in his memory palace, the effect of simulation and deduction would only get better and better. One day in the future, perhaps Charles wouldn't need Deep Blue, and his occlumency could bring about an effect similar to Deep Blue. Just then, Charles opened his eyes, and what came into view were bouquets and various gifts piled almost to the ceiling in the hospital wing, as well as various blessing cards. These were all sent by Hogwarts students. Almost everyone in Hufflepuff House sent a gift, hoping Charles would wake up soon. Looking at the gifts and cards, Charles' eyes showed a hint of helplessness. He really didn't want to have any interaction with these young wizards. He came to Hogwarts only for the deduction points and various materials he could obtain here. But after taking down Snape this time, it seemed he had become the king of the kids. Shaking his head, Charles got up from the sickbed and pushed open the door to go out. However, when he opened the door, the figure sitting outside the door made Charles pause. Little Hannah? Sitting by the door was indeed Hannah Abbott. She seemed to have been guarding here and had just fallen asleep not long ago. She was then startled awake by Charles opening the door, her face full of exhaustion. But upon seeing Charles, Hannah's expression immediately became excited. Charles? You're awake. Are you okay? I was so scared when I saw you faint, I almost died. Later, I heard you were hit by the Cruciatus curse, and only then did I realize it was an unforgivable curse. Neville also cried. He said his parents were driven mad by the spell. I didn't dare to leave, afraid that if you went mad, no one would know. Hannah chattered on for a while, then her face flushed, and she whispered, I'll go get Madame Pomfrey. Looking at Hannah's hurried retreating figure, a wry smile appeared on Charles' face. He had indeed interacted with Hannah a few times at the Leaky Cauldron and found the little girl quite cute, but she was only 11 years old. What kind of person would have ideas about a girl this age? But looking at the situation now, Hannah seemed to have developed feelings for him. Then, Charles suddenly turned his head, remembering that among the pile of gifts by his bed, there seemed to be quite a few small pink cards, some even with hearts drawn on them. There were cards from Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. There were even a few unsigned ones, possibly from Slytherin. What was this? Charles took a deep breath, and occlumency cleared the distracting thoughts from his mind. At least for the next few years, he was still in the peak period of his strength development. Every minute and second invested could bring tangible improvement in strength. Also, his strength was still quite a distance from Dumbledore and peak Voldemort. Behind him, there was also Dark watching. Although Dark had been playing the role of giving him points, Dark was truly improving rapidly every second in the Dream Relay. If Charles were to slack off one day and get involved in romance, he might be surpassed by Dark. Charles did not want to become fish meat to be slaughtered by Dark the next time he entered the Dream Relay. Therefore, dating and such things should be put aside for now. Just then, Madame Pomfrey hurried over. When she saw Charles standing, she let out a shriek. Sit back down. Lie back in bed. Then, even though her examination showed that Charles was fine except for being a little mentally tired, Madame Pomfrey still insisted that Charles needed at least 3 more days of rest in bed. After all, this was damage caused by an unforgivable curse, and no one wanted Charles to have any after effects. And then, after hearing that Charles was awake, the students of Hogwarts swarmed over, but they were all scolded away by Madame Pomfrey, who wouldn't let them disturb Charles' rest. Only a few heads of houses came in, and Madame Pomfrey also instructed them to finish their visit quickly. After a moment of silence, Professor McGonagall spoke with a hint of awkwardness. Headmaster Dumbledore is overwhelmed with Snape's matter. The pressure from the Ministry of Magic is immense, and then he needs to find a new potions professor, and the position of head of Slytherin House cannot be left vacant. I mean, it's not that he doesn't care about you, but he's temporarily too busy. I've already sent him a message, and he will come later. Charles waved his hand, indicating that he understood, and Professor McGonagall didn't need to say more about it. Professor McGonagall then breathed a sigh of relief and quickly took out a notebook and handed it to Charles. These are my transfiguration notes. You can read them when you feel better. Also, there are some reference books in the notes. You can look through them if you have the chance later. It's hard to find these books elsewhere. Charles' eyes showed gratitude. He still admired Professor McGonagall's character and naturally wouldn't take out his anger on Professor McGonagall, who was also from Gryffindor, because of Dumbledore's actions. Then, Professor Flitwick, beaming, praised Charles. Snape might be a bastard, but he's got real skills. Humph, back when the Dark Lord was rampant, Snape also. Forget it, let's not talk about that. In short, Charles, you managed to take down Snape in a one-on-one, that's impressive. He scratched his head, pulled out a list of reference books, and winked at Charles. These books are classics and charms, but they are also very precious, with almost no copies circulating. They are all collected in one place, ahem, you know. You can look for these books later. Hearing this, Charles had a rough idea. After the two professors left, he turned to look at the head of Hufflepuff, Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout took out a bottle of potion from her robes. Here, drink this first. Charles nodded, tilted his head back, and drank the potion. The next moment, Deep Blue sounded a series of prompts. A bottle of potion brought Charles over 50,000 deduction points. Charles' heart trembled slightly. Even the materials from a fire dragon couldn't gather so many points. The preciousness of this potion was evident. Looking at the obvious fatigue on Professor Sprout's face, one could tell that she had likely put in a lot of effort for this bottle of potion. Thinking back to how Professor Sprout stood firmly in front of Charles even when facing Dumbledore, this head of house, though not one to cause trouble, truly cared for her little badgers. Charles took a deep breath and solemnly thanked Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout, however, shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Then she wiped away her tears. You still need to rest. I won't say much more, but there are two things I need to tell you. The first thing is Hogwarts compensation to you. You will become the first student in Hogwarts history to have the freedom to attend classes. This means you can choose not to attend any classes throughout your 7 years, as long as you pass the final assessment to graduate successfully. At the same time, you will also have higher authority than a prefect. You can deduct points from other students for violating school rules and add points for commendable actions. This authority is close to that of a professor, similar to a teaching assistant. Also, I believe with your intelligence, you must have guessed from listening to Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick just now, that the Hogwarts restricted section is fully open to you. This is unprecedented since the establishment of the Hogwarts restricted section. Hearing Professor Sprout's words, Charles also nodded. He didn't care about the authority, but the full access to the restricted section was useful to him. Otherwise, he would have to get a note from a professor to borrow books from the restricted section, which was not only troublesome but also left a record of what books he borrowed. Charles didn't want anyone to know his browsing history. Furthermore, the restricted section was not as lenient as imagined. Having a professor's note didn't mean you could see everything. For some areas of books, a professor had to be present to take them out. A note alone wouldn't suffice. With full browsing access to the restricted section, it was much more convenient, and Charles could accept that. What about the second thing? Charles asked. Professor Sprout's face showed dissatisfaction. Lucius Malfoy, as a member of the school board, strongly demanded that you be punished. Although the absurd punishments he advocated were not approved, due to the matter with Draco Malfoy, you still have to accept a punishment. After your injuries have healed, you will have to go into the Forbidden Forest at night accompanied by the gamekeeper, Hagrid, as a form of disciplinary action. Professor Sprout said angrily, how can they do this? You've just recovered from your injuries, how can they send you to the Forbidden Forest? It's too much. At this moment, Charles was first stunned, then nodded in deep agreement. Indeed, it really is too much. Although I was in the right, I wasn't entirely in the right. As the old saying goes, it takes two to tango. How can the punishment be so light? One night isn't enough? Professor, could you please help me convey my strong request to let me survive in the wilderness and there? Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description. 100 Phoenix, Lost Age. Dumbledore doesn't understand genius. Looking at Charles' excited face upon hearing about the Forbidden Forest, Professor Sprout was momentarily speechless. Charles, I thought you'd be scared of the Forbidden Forest at night, like a normal child. Charles coughed twice, trying his best to look terrified. Scared? I'm so scared, Professor. Don't look at me like this, I'm actually about to be scared to death. Professor Sprout sighed. Alright, stop pretending. Seeing that you're not afraid of the Forbidden Forest like the other little badgers, I think it's quite good. A strange look appeared on her face. After all, logically speaking, the Forbidden Forest is our Hufflepuff territory. Why would we be afraid of our own territory? Charles was stunned for a moment, then his eyes showed interest. The Forbidden Forest is our Hufflepuff territory. Professor Sprout nodded. When the founder Hufflepuff was at Hogwarts, in order to perfect her recipes and also to be able to obtain fresh magical plants and animals at any time, she put a lot of effort into establishing the Forbidden Forest. Many magical plants and animals that were originally scattered in various places were collected by the founder and put into the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest was also magically transformed into an environment suitable for the survival of most magical plants and animals. At that time, the Forbidden Forest wasn't even called that name, but was called the Hogwarts Breeding Garden. It was only later, as time passed, that the trees in the Forbidden Forest grew too well, and generations of students kept bringing in various magical animal cubs, and the Forbidden Forest grew larger and larger. Hundreds of years ago, its scale had grown so large that Hogwarts was completely unable to maintain it. It was clearly an independent kingdom, and even many gregarious magical animals lived inside. So it was simply renamed the Forbidden Forest, and students were forbidden from entering. It was also from that time that entering the Forbidden Forest at night became a punishment. Even students from Hufflepuff House, in each generation, there were only a few who could go to the Forbidden Forest to get ingredients like the students before. This also led to Hufflepuff's magical recipes gradually fading out of people's sight from that time on. Hearing this history recounted by Professor Sprout, Charles also showed a look of astonishment. The Forbidden Forest was originally Hufflepuff's breeding garden. He really didn't know this. If that were the case, the founder of Hufflepuff truly left a huge treasure trove for future generations, containing countless rare magical plants and animals that could be utilized. But the current Hufflepuff students had no idea about this treasure mountain, and even if they did, they were unable to enter and obtain those rare materials. From what Charles saw during his last visit to the Hufflepuff Little Kitchen, the house elves there probably couldn't make the meals from the Hufflepuff magical recipes more than a few times a year, which was truly a pity. Professor Sprout showed a slight smile. So, I think it's quite good if you're not afraid of the Forbidden Forest. At least it won't waste the treasure trove left by the founder. Many materials in the Forbidden Forest are very difficult to find after leaving Hogwarts, rare and precious. As she spoke, Professor Sprout handed Charles a list. This list contains rare materials that can be produced in the Forbidden Forest. You can look for them when you go to the Forbidden Forest in a few days. Many of them can be used to make magical meals. Charles nodded. Then, Professor Sprout hesitated for a moment, and took out an ancient map, handing it to Charles. And this is the core area that the founder arranged in the Forbidden Forest back then. It has been over 1,000 years now. Successive Hufflepuff heads of house have tried to find the things inside, but have found nothing. Perhaps you can also try. Charles' face showed curiosity. Something left by the founder, after 1,000 years, what is it? A strange light flickered in Professor Sprout's eyes. A phoenix egg. Charles was stunned for a moment. Phoenix? Are you saying, a phoenix? Professor Sprout shook her head, denying it flatly. A phoenix is a phoenix, and a phoenix is a phoenix. Although both have the characteristic of immortality, they are two different things. A phoenix is merely a mortal creature born in an era without phoenixes. How can it be compared to a phoenix? Only ignorant people confuse these two creatures. Although the phoenix is a rare magical animal, it has never been extinct. Dumbledore keeps one. But the phoenix, even in the era of the founder, was already an extinct magical animal. No, perhaps it should be said, it was an extinct mythical animal. The legendary phoenix, also known as the Paradise Phoenix, possesses sacred magic far more powerful than that of a unicorn or even a phoenix. Its sacred flames can destroy almost all dark magic and dark creatures. Its feathers can resist darkness and restore life. Legend has it that it even has magical power that can extend life or even grant immortality. Lady Hufflepuff at that time, by chance, discovered what might be the last Paradise Phoenix egg in the magical world. She spent countless resources to arrange magic for it in the core area of the Forbidden Forest, waiting for the phoenix's rebirth. It has been 1,000 years now. Generations of Hufflepuff heads of house have inherited this secret, and have also gone to the Forbidden Forest to search, but have found nothing. It is unknown whether the phoenix's rebirth failed, or if it flew away after successfully being reborn, or if the magic left by the founder became ineffective over time. In short, no one has ever found that phoenix egg. But the legendary Paradise Phoenix will choose its master, just like a phoenix, and the standard is far more demanding than that of a phoenix. One must possess incredibly powerful sacred magic to gain the allegiance of a Paradise Phoenix. Professor McGonagall told me that you showed a strong inclination towards sacred magic when choosing your wand, coupled with your exceptional talent. Perhaps you will be the Hufflepuff with the most hope of finding the phoenix in 1,000 years. After hearing Professor Sprout's explanation, Charles' heart also felt a surge of heat. A Paradise Phoenix with incredibly powerful sacred magic. This is simply a perfect match for my magical animagus. Originally, Charles' second magical animagus was planned to be a Cerberus, and for the third, he hadn't decided yet. still debating between a unicorn, a basilisk, and a phoenix. Now it seems, if he can find a paradise phoenix, there's no need to hesitate. Transforming into a paradise phoenix would definitely cause Charles' magical power to skyrocket. At the same time, his sacred magic spells would also reach a new height with the enhancement of this magical animagus. It could even extend his lifespan and grant eternal youth. Isn't this much better than the Philosopher's Stone or Horcruxes, which have side effects? Charles took the ancient map from Professor Sprout, determined to go to the Forbidden Forest to search for traces of the phoenix. With Deep Blue in hand, as long as the phoenix exists in this world, Charles believed he was the most likely person to find it. After explaining so many things to Charles, Professor Sprout, who was already looking tired from preparing the potion for Charles, appeared even more weary. She then stood up and instructed Charles before leaving. Although you are not afraid of the Forbidden Forest, there are not many beings in the Forbidden Forest that can threaten you. But you must be careful of Lucius Malfoy. His close friend is dead, and his son is injured. A dark wizard who was once a Death Eater will not let this go easily. Try to delay going to the Forbidden Forest for a few days. Charles nodded, looking at the departing Professor Sprout with gratitude in his eyes. Having struggled in society for so many years in his previous life, Charles could still distinguish who had ulterior motives and who was genuinely good to him. Although Hogwarts had professors like Snape, the other heads of houses had quite good character. Professor Sprout was even more exceptional towards him. She treated him as the successor of Hufflepuff House, even revealing the matter of the Phoenix. I owe her a great debt today. I must repay it if I have the chance. This thought surfaced in Charles' mind. Then, he took a step, cast a disillusionment charm on himself, left the hospital wing, and walked towards the Hogwarts library. No matter what he did, strength was always the priority. Although Charles had managed to get rid of Snape through his schemes this time, and even publicly challenged Dumbledore, leaving Dumbledore speechless, such covert calculations and arrangements could not be used frequently. The reason for resorting to covert schemes was precisely because his own strength was insufficient. If he could beat Dumbledore Black and Blue, what did it matter if he pushed him down from the position of Hogwarts headmaster? Why bother with such petty tricks? The knowledge in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library would be of great help in improving Charles' strength. Not only could it provide a large amount of high-level materials, reducing the point consumption during the deduction process, but it could also be stored in the Memory Palace, increasing Charles' mental strength and simultaneously enhancing the effects of mental simulation and knowledge deduction. Naturally, Charles would not miss such an opportunity. Upon arriving at the library, Charles dispelled the disillusionment charm and headed straight for the restricted section. Madame Pants, who was in charge of guarding the library, did not stop Charles upon seeing him. She merely instructed Charles to cherish the precious books and then allowed him to enter, clearly having been informed beforehand. Just as Charles entered the restricted section, in the headmaster's office, the somewhat haggard Dumbledore's expression shifted slightly. Charles Evans went to the restricted section. He shook his head. This child is too eager for power. If he is not properly restrained, I fear he will go to extremes. I must make him understand that besides power, there are many other things in this world worth pursuing, such as love, such as friendship. Besides this, Dumbledore had another worry in his heart. That was, the current Charles was already radiating brilliance. In contrast, Harry Potter, as the savior, was simply unremarkable. Harry Potter was even close to becoming Charles' little fanboy. How could this be? Harry Potter was the protagonist in the script arranged by Dumbledore. Dumbledore was even prepared to do anything to ensure Gryffindor won all the remaining house cups. How could Charles keep stealing the spotlight? If Charles were to gain more powerful magic in the restricted section and his strength improved further, what would happen? He didn't know what earth-shattering things he would do, and how would Harry Potter gain enough prestige? Ensuring Harry Potter's growth and status, in Dumbledore's view, was the bigger picture, which was related to the plan to eliminate Voldemort. As for Charles, it wasn't that Dumbledore was narrow-minded and wanted revenge because Charles had publicly questioned him. Rather, it was for the greater good that he had to suppress him. Charles' current strength was already sufficient to be a pawn to clear obstacles for Harry Potter in the future. Coupled with the natural strengthening of young wizards as they grew older, this was already enough. Dumbledore did not need Charles to be overly strong. Dumbledore stood up and walked to the bookshelf in the headmaster's office. There was an entire extra row of bookshelves here compared to before, all filled with books from the restricted section. Upon closer inspection, one would find that the books on the reference list that Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick had given Charles earlier were basically all included on this bookshelf. In addition, those books that recorded truly profound magic had also been mostly moved here. A strange look appeared on Dumbledore's face. These books will be put away for now and replaced with some purely theoretical and purely hypothetical books. This is also for Charles' own good. He should temper his nature, develop in the academic direction, and broaden his horizons. Young people shouldn't always focus on profound magic. Learning it a few years later won't delay anything. I will naturally arrange it later. Or, Dumbledore's gaze was deep. If Charles was willing to come to him, accept some tasks he arranged, and pass the tests he set, it wasn't impossible for him to give Charles some of the books. This way, under his arrangements, he could ensure that Charles always stayed on the right track. In the headmaster's office, Phineas, who was known as the most disliked headmaster, couldn't help but ask, "Dumbledore, are you so sure Charles Evans will come to you? What if he doesn't?" Dumbledore showed a look of certainty. How could such a genius lack the desire for power and magic? He couldn't wait to come to the restricted section as soon as he could get out of bed, which also proves this point. Since that's the case, when he can't find what he needs in the restricted section, he should know who to come to. A smile played on Dumbledore's lips. No one understands a genius's thoughts better than I do. Just watch, Phineas, Charles will be here soon. He leisurely brewed himself a cup of tea, prepared 2 plates of desserts, and waited in the headmaster's office with composure. 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed. Dumbledore remained unmoving, still slowly sipping his tea. Half an hour passed. Dumbledore was calm and composed, replenishing the desserts he had finished. 2 hours, 3 hours passed. Outside, a faint light appeared on the horizon, the Hogwarts chickens started crowing, and Dumbledore, who had waited all night, still didn't receive Charles' visit. A chicken crow woke Dumbledore from his doze. He glanced at the time, his eyes showing a look of disbelief. Charles Evans hasn't come yet. What is he doing then? Soon, news came from Madame Pants, the librarian, and the ubiquitous portraits in Hogwarts. Dumbledore's eyes widened even more. He really just stayed in the restricted section and read books all night. No, he's really not interested in those profound magic spells that were taken away. Phineas's portrait let out a schadenfreude laugh. Dumbledore, it seems you don't understand geniuses as well as you claim. Dumbledore frowned, and after his surprise, he regained the calmness of having everything under control. It didn't matter if Charles didn't come. In fact, seeing Charles like this, truly immersed in those theoretical and hypothetical studies with little practical value, was even more to Dumbledore's liking. Studying these theoretical hypotheses didn't help much in improving magical strength. This would undoubtedly significantly slow down Charles' strength improvement. And as Charles was immersed in this knowledge, he would naturally cause less trouble, and over time, the commotion he caused at Hogwarts would gradually subside. Everything would return to the track Dumbledore had arranged. From granting Charles Evans access to the restricted section, this was Dumbledore's open scheme. If he didn't want those profound magic spells, then Charles' strength improvement speed would be limited. If he wanted those magic spells, he would have to listen to Dumbledore's arrangements. No matter what, Dumbledore wouldn't lose out. Everything is still under control. Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief. But for some reason, he always felt a faint unease in his heart. Time rewound to last night, when Charles had just entered the restricted section. He strolled through the restricted section, holding the reference books left for him by Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick, and walked towards the bookshelves mentioned in them. However, upon reaching the nearest bookshelf, Charles noticed signs of it having been disturbed. The Transfiguration texts Professor McGonagall had mentioned were gone, replaced by miscellaneous writings on Transfiguration, filled with interesting but incredibly complex propositions. Achieving results in these areas would certainly lead to top-tier academic papers, but it wouldn't contribute much to one's personal strength, far less direct than learning a more powerful Transfiguration spell. His expression shifted slightly, and with a cold sneer, he went to examine the other bookshelves. As expected, all the texts mentioned in the reference list had been taken, leaving only these purely theoretical books. Without needing to think, Charles knew who was responsible. Dumbledore's attitude of strictly guarding advanced magic is truly identical to how he was in the original story. Looking at the original story, it's clear that no matter how famous Dumbledore was or how high his prestige, the old man harbored a strong sense of caution towards people. Even at the very end, he wouldn't tell Harry Potter the truth, and he worried that Harry Potter might abandon the responsibility of destroying the Horcruxes in pursuit of the Deathly Hallows, making preemptive arrangements for this. But if he had the time to arrange these things, leaving a few powerful spells for the Harry Potter trio, or arranging a few magical items that could be used for combat or escape, the process of the Harry Potter trio destroying the Horcruxes would have been infinitely smoother. Why would they be like they were in the original story, not knowing how to destroy the locket after obtaining it, and almost going their separate ways midway due to the locket's temptation. One should know that even Malfoy's lackeys, Crabbe and Goyle, those two dim-witted fellows, learned how to cast fiendfire at Hogwarts at the same time. The Harry Potter trio, however, didn't learn any powerful magic that year. If only Dumbledore had left Harry Potter a spell similar to fiendfire, how could destroying the Horcruxes they got their hands on be so difficult? It wasn't just the Harry Potter trio. The members of the Order of the Phoenix who followed Dumbledore also didn't receive any magical help or support. Snape even learned magic from Voldemort and could fly directly. After Wormtail lost a hand serving Voldemort, Voldemort also rewarded him with a powerful alchemical arm. From this perspective, it's not hard to see that although Voldemort lost his mind due to splitting too many Horcruxes, he was truly generous when it came to rewarding power. In contrast, on Dumbledore's side, the only help received was love. Wanting the horse to run while also making the horse find its own grass to eat, the difficult struggle between the Order of the Phoenix and the Death Eaters was not without this factor. Charles casually opened a book left by Dumbledore, and what met his eyes was an extremely complex and intricate spell model. The academic value of this thing was undoubtedly extremely high, but how it could be applied in practice was debatable. For wizards pursuing strength, studying such theoretical books was undoubtedly taking the long way around. But a hint of mockery appeared at the corner of Charles' mouth. Dumbledore probably wouldn't have imagined that Charles possessed an unreasonable existence like Deep Blue. Even knowledge in such niche fields without practical value could be converted by Deep Blue into materials for the corresponding field. As for not learning advanced spells, what did that matter? As long as there were enough materials and enough points, just rely on Deep Blue to deduce it. Give Charles infinite knowledge, and he could leverage infinite worlds. Immediately, Charles waved his wand, and one forbidden book after another on the bookshelf floated up, automatically turning pages. Those profound pieces of knowledge, under Charles' shifting gaze, were all converted by Deep Blue into materials for the corresponding fields. Host has obtained advanced transfiguration materials. Subsequent deduction of transfiguration requires fewer points. Host has obtained advanced charms materials. Deduction of most charms requires fewer points. Host has obtained advanced dark arts materials. Prompt sounded in his mind like a flood. At the same time, in Charles' mental world's memory palace, book after book was filled in. Compared to the books he obtained from Flourish and Blots, the knowledge contained in the books in the Hogwarts restricted section far exceeded them in both quantity and depth. The effect on the improvement of mental strength was also significantly enhanced. Charles' eyes showed a fervent look. Not enough, not fast enough. He waved his wand, and the speed at which these books turned pages further increased. Charles simultaneously spent deduction points, relying on Deep Blue to instantly speed-read the contents of these books. Unconsciously, one bookshelf, two bookshelves, large volumes that would take ordinary people years, decades, or even a lifetime to study were mastered by Charles, transforming into accumulations in his memory palace. Charles' mental strength also increased significantly overnight in the restricted section. Just as the sky outside was beginning to lighten, Charles picked up another thick book. A prompt different from the previous one sounded in Charles' mind. Host has obtained materials on the history of the magical world. Charles was stunned for a moment, his gaze focused, falling on this book. The name of the book was The Lost Age. Looking at the publication date, it should be a book from decades ago, considered relatively young among the books in the restricted section. And when Charles saw the author's name, he suddenly widened his eyes. Dark. Join me on Patreon if you want to request a novel, link in the description.
Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Also, you can request any novel so I can turn into audiobooks. Check out our Patreon for more details.